All right. All right, Ms. Leidy, Ms. Coley. At this time, then, the court is going to call cause number 418 CV 120, Jordan Street versus Reese Taylor in the District Court for the 170th Judicial District, McLennan County, Texas. If I can have an appearance on behalf of the plaintiff, please.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Deeksha Kohli, and I, along with my co-counsel Chandler Matz, are appearing on behalf of the plaintiff, Jordan Street.
Thank you. If I can have an appearance on behalf of the defendants.
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning. My name is Simone Lighty, and along with my co-counsel, Mr. Joshua White, we have the honor of representing the defendant in this case, Reese Taylor.
Thank you. Are there any matters that we need to take up for pretrial before I allow you to proceed with the opening?
Yes, Your Honor. The plaintiff has a couple housekeeping matters and one motion. May we address our housekeeping matters first?
You may.
Your Honor, first, we note that certain exhibits in this case have been pre-admitted by Your Honor. Given that, we ask permission on behalf of both of the parties to display those exhibits on the screen.
Is there any objection to that, Ms. Leidy?
No, Your Honor.
That shall be permitted.
Your Honor, we've also met and conferred with co-counsel before, or opposing counsel before trial, and we've agreed that all witnesses except for the parties and the experts shall be constructively sequestered if Your Honor would allow that.
Any responses, Leidy?
No, that's my understanding as well.
We shall proceed in that manner.
Our only other housekeeping matter, Your Honor, has to do with the Zoom screen. We've pre-cleared this request with the tournament coordinators, and we ask that we encourage all of the scoring judges to use something called side-by-side mode when exhibits are being shared on the screen so that they can see the advocate and the exhibit at the same time. We have a brief PowerPoint presentation that we've created to explain how to change to this view, which we've also cleared with the tournament.
All right, Ms. Leidy, any response?
That's fine with us, Your Honor.
Okay, and so Ms. Coley, I'll just tell you the scoring judges may do so if they so choose, and I will allow you to present the presentation to them. I will decline to proceed in that manner and will maintain gallery view. But with
yes,
that,
Your Honor, we understand that for the live streaming purposes that Your Honor has been instructed not to change your view.
But you may proceed in advising your scoring judges of how to do that. But again, it will be at their discretion.
Of course, Your Honor, we understand. I've just shared my screen. For anyone who's using the default view, the presentation is now very large and my view is very small. Then it'll be hard to see both the advocate's witnesses and the exhibits when they're being shared. Therefore, we ask that all scoring judges change their view to side-by-side mode now. If you do it now, then you won't have to change it again in the future because Zoom will automatically switch to this better view whenever an exhibit is shared, and it'll go away whenever the exhibit is taken down. I'll walk you through how to change your view to side-by-side mode. If you see on the top of your screen, there's an arrow next to where it says View Options. Go ahead and click that button. Next, click on the last option that's listed called side-by-side mode. And the last step, you'll see that right now, the screen is still really large compared to my video. So to fix that, if you drag the gray marker that separates my video from the screen being shared, if you just drag that marker to the center, it'll split the screen half between my video and half with the screen being shared. Your Honor, if the scoring judges have any questions about how to change to this view, I'd be happy to answer those at this time.
If the scoring judges have any questions, they are free to send me chats or texts, and I will advise you at that time. You may proceed.
Your Honor, those are all the housekeeping matters that we have. After the defense addresses any of their housekeeping matters, we do have a motion.
Thank you. At this time, Ms. Leidy, then?
Yes, Your Honor. Our only housekeeping is a technology one. Specifically, we have been having issues on our end whereby the motion sensor lights have been, for whatever reason, turning off even when I am up and speaking. So we just ask that our time be paused so that I may turn the lights back on if that does happen.
Certainly. If we have a lights out all night event, we will pause. Anything
Your Honor,
further?
yes, Your Honor, just briefly, we also have had some issues yesterday with the internet and basically all the power in the building turning off. So if that does happen, with the court's permission, if this does happen during opening statements or closing arguments, may I ask the judge where I just left off, or at least what Your Honor had last heard before that happened, so that way I may proceed in the correct spot?
I think, Ms. Lighty, let's take that up if that situation occurs. And at that time, I'll determine where and how it's best appropriate for you to proceed with respect to opening or close, whether you should begin again or pick up where you left off. But let's take that up if and when that situation occurs. I appreciate you advising me of the fact that you've been having those difficulties. Anything further?
No, Your Honor.
All right. Then with that, Ms. Coley, I'll return to you. You indicated that you had a pretrial motion to address.
Yes, Your Honor. We met and conferred with opposing counsel before trial today, and we came to an agreement about the plaintiff's motion. We'd like to put that agreement onto the record at this time, if that's okay with Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Your Honor, the parties have agreed to admit Exhibit 14, which is Rory Street's autopsy report.
Ms. Lighty, can you confirm that an agreement has been reached regarding admission of the autopsy report?
That's right, Your Honor, it has.
Anything further to advise as it relates to that agreement, Ms. Lighty?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you. Ms. Coley, anything further?
Nothing further from the plaintiff, Your Honor.
Does that conclude our pretrial matters? Ms. Coley?
From the plaintiff, that concludes our pretrial matters. However, we did come to agreements about the defense's motion. I can put those onto the record, or Ms. Lighty can, whatever Your Honor would prefer.
I'll turn to Ms. Lighty. I just need to confirm, Ms. Coley, does that exhaust the plaintiff's pretrial items?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you. All right, Ms. Lighty, coming to you.
Yes, Your Honor. As Ms. Coley stated, we did agree on two motions in limine that we would like to state onto the record. The first being that Ms. Coley has indicated that she does not intend to offer evidence during this trial regarding a past incident out of Reese Taylor's former employment at University High. Just by way of background, during this incident, Reese Taylor allegedly pushed one of her athletes to the ground, which didn't cause any injury. We'd just like to indicate that opposing counsel will not intend to offer any of that such evidence on the record today.
Ms. Coley, can you confirm that that is the agreement that has been reached?
That's correct, Your Honor.
Thank you. Ms. Lighty, anything further?
Yes, Your Honor. The second agreement, just again by way of background, relates to after Rory's death, Reese Taylor, as the coach of the Waco High School varsity soccer team, had put up several tents on the otherwise shadeless soccer field. And Ms. Coley has indicated that she also does not intend to offer any of that evidence here today.
Ms. Coley, can you confirm?
Yes, Your Honor. We understand that that evidence is inadmissible under Rule 407, so we don't intend to talk about it.
Thank you. All right, then I'll confirm that the court is aware of each of the agreements that have been reached regarding Exhibit 14, and as well as the pieces of evidence that Ms. Coley does not intend to admit. Ms. Lighty, do you have any further pretrial matters to address with the court at this time?
No, Your Honor.
All right, so that concludes your pretrial matters?
That's right.
Okay.
And we're ready to proceed to opening when Your Honor is.
Wonderful. I'm marking your time. So again, if y'all bear with me, this is my first time to be the time judge when I'm judging this competition. So I'm just trying to make sure that I'm getting that. I think that I have correctly written the pretrial time. And so with that, we will turn to opening. Is the plaintiff prepared to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may. Please go forward, Ms. Coley.
She didn't stop until Rory Street was dead. It's a September afternoon here in Waco, 104 degrees. Rory Street is standing in the middle of a soccer field. Her shoulders are slumped. Her face is pale. Her hands on her hips. She's been running, sprinting in the sun for more than an hour without a sip of water. She raises her head to see her teammates. all lined up by their coach with one instruction. When I blow the whistle, you guys are going to take turns tackling Rory. Coach blows the whistle. Rory starts to dribble, and the first teammate knocks her down. She gets up. Coach blows the whistle again. Another player takes her out. Rory wobbles to her feet. She looks to her coach. They all look to the coach. But the coach blows her whistle. 15 times Rory Street tries to dribble. 15 times this player, this teenager is knocked to the ground. 15 times. Her coach blows her whistle. But there is no 16th time. Because after 15, Rory doesn't get up. Her body starts to tremble, then shake, then convulse. Her head bounces against the turf. Until suddenly, she stops. Someone calls an ambulance, but it's too late. The coach in that practice was the defendant, Reese Taylor. The evidence will show the defendant didn't stop blowing her whistle when she saw Rory was struggling. The defendant didn't stop when she saw Rory couldn't stand on her own. The evidence will show the defendant didn't stop until Rory Street is dead. Rory Street was 18 years old. She liked watching TV. She liked spending time with her friends. She liked T-Bone's barbecue. Today, Rory's father is suing the defendant, Coach Reese Taylor, for her wrongful death. As the plaintiff, we have the burden of proving it's more likely than not that the defendant's negligence killed Rory Street. And we're going to meet that burden with 3 simple facts. First, the defendant put every kid at risk. Second, the defendant put Rory Street in danger. And third, the defendant ignored the warning signs. So let's take those one at a time. Number 1, the defendant used extreme disciplinary methods that put every child at risk. The defendant's a soccer coach, and you're going to learn that there are rules for high school soccer coaches. Rules to make sure that coaches don't push their players too hard. And one of those rules requires that when the temperature reaches triple digits, there has to be a water break every 15 minutes. On September 7th, 2018, it was 104 degrees Fahrenheit. Practice lasted more than an hour. The evidence will show that the defendant was required to provide at least 5 water breaks. You won't hear that the defendant provided even one. In fact, the evidence will show that the defendant wasn't just running practice without water breaks. She was using extreme discipline without water breaks. sprint 180 feet down the field, crawl 180 feet back, over and over again. Now, the defendant's going to say, this is a tradition. We've been doing this for years and no one has gotten hurt. But you won't hear of any other coach who has ever used these methods in 104-degree heat. That brings me to point number 2. While the defendant put every student at risk, she put Rory Street in danger. Because that afternoon, the defendant created a new form of discipline, a tackling line. Every player got in a line and took turns slide tackling Rory. That's when a player slides on the grass, cleats first, and tries to take the ball away from their opponent, even if it means taking out their legs and knocking them down. They'll say it's a part of the game. But you're going to learn it had never been used as punishment until September 7th, 2018. When Rory was already exhausted, 15 teammates, one after the other, knocked Rory to the ground. Which brings me to point number 3. The defendant ignored the warning signs. Today, you're going to hear from one of Rory's teammates. She'll testify that when the defendant created that tackling line, Rory's face was pale. Her hands were on her hips. She was struggling to breathe. And when the other players knocked Rory down, she struggled to get back up. In fact, you'll learn that eventually, when Rory couldn't get up, the defendant walked over, grabbed Rory's shirt, yanked her to her feet. And she blew her whistle. She knocked her down again. Within minutes, Rory was dead from heat stroke. Now, I want to be upfront about what happened when Rory's body was taken to the coroner's office. They found trace amounts of cocaine residue in her system. Nanograms. But Dr. Reagan McConaughey, the chief of cardiology at McClellan Memorial, will testify that Rory didn't die from this microscopic amount of cocaine. She'll testify that Rory died from heat stroke during the defendant's practice. We acknowledge that a good coach pushes their players to be the best. But the evidence will show that this coach pushed Rory too far. The evidence will show she didn't let Rory stop for a water break. She didn't let Rory stop when she was struggling. She didn't let Rory stop when she could no longer stand on her own. At the end of this trial, we're going to ask you to find the defendant liable because she didn't stop until Rory Street was dead. Thank you.
Ms. Leidy, is the defense prepared to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may.
May it please the court, opposing counsel. It wasn't the coach, it was the cocaine. Not a single person on the soccer field knew that Rory Street had cocaine running through her veins because she kept that information to herself. She told no one, not her teammates, not her trainer, and certainly not her coach. And the sad truth is, all of the discipline, all of the intervention, and all of the safety measures could not have prevented her death. Because when it came to Rory Street's death, it wasn't the coach, it was the cocaine. Good morning. My name is Simone Leidy, and along with my co-counsel Joshua White, we have the honor of representing Reese Taylor, or she's better known in these parts, Coach. And before I talk to you about Coach Taylor, I want to take a moment to acknowledge that this is a tragedy. No parent should have to deal with burying their own child. And we expect that throughout today's trial, you're going to get to see a picture of Rory herself. And in that picture, you'll be able to see the hope in her eyes and all of the potential. And when you're confronted with the tragedy of her death, there is a desire to make someone answer, to hold someone responsible, to make someone pay. And we expect that that's what opposing counsel is going to be counting on today. But just because it's a tragic death does not mean that there's someone to blame. And it's certainly not Coach Reese Taylor. So allow me to reintroduce you to her. You see, Coach was born and raised right here in Waco, and she's lived here all of her life. Well, except for the time that she went over to Texas A&M to receive her degree in physical education. And then following college, she returned right here, right back home, and settled in a position at her alma mater, Waco High. You see, Coach has spent the better part of the last 26 years coaching just about every sport under the sun. And she spent the last 20 seasons coaching soccer. You see, most people might think that, well, since the field is so big, soccer might be a little bit of a passive sport. But I guarantee you what you're going to hear today is that soccer is a physical one. But high schoolers can be fickle. Soccer games are long, but soccer seasons are longer. And so to help her athletes maximize their full potential, Coach Taylor pushed them with repetition, conditioning, and with drill after drill after drill. For Coach Taylor, keeping up with the latest and the best coaching practices and techniques was paramount to her coaching style. Because not only would it make her a better coach, it would make her players better and keep them safe. She was tough on them, sure, as a coach should be, but she loved each and every one of them. And Rory was no different. She pushed them each and every day of practice, and September 7th, 2018 was no different. You see, on that day, the team was running a full-blown scrimmage, simulating one of the games that they would experience later on in the season. Now, opposing counsel is right, this wasn't just any practice, it was a scrimmage, and a scrimmage requires the attention of each and every player on the team. What you're going to hear today, though, is when Rory Street arrived at practice, something was off. See, Rory was a star player on the team. And for a star player, just about everything comes with ease. But on September 7th, 2018, when Rory put on her cleats and marched onto that soccer field, Rory was playing sloppy. Rory couldn't make the easy passes to her teammates. And when there was a wide open net with no goalie and no defenders in sight, Rory couldn't even make that. What opposing counsel, what we expect they're going to say is that, well, from that moment, Rory was showing obvious signs of heat exhaustion. But what you're going to hear today from Coach Taylor and from trainer Jess Merriweather, Rory was just goofing off. Sure, she was the star player, and it was unusual for her to be a little off. But what you're also going to hear is that it wasn't uncommon. When Coach Taylor saw that she was playing sloppy, there was nothing physically wrong with her. And the heat certainly wasn't bothering her or anybody else, as far as she could tell. We now know. And what you're going to learn here today is that unbeknownst to Coach Taylor, Rory Street stepped onto that soccer field with cocaine running through her veins. And you see, this is important because it created a ticking time bomb. The moment she stepped on that field, knowing that not only would she be in the hot Waco sun, but she'd be working out and she'd be working hard. See, let me explain how cocaine can affect the system. Today, we're going to call a toxicologist, Spencer London. And Mr. London's going to explain to you all the dangers that are associated with cocaine use. You see, cocaine can constrict your blood. It can dilate your pupils. It can increase your heartbeat. It can increase your body temperature. And it can cause chest pains and cardiac arrhythmia. And those are just the symptoms because the outcomes are even worse. Cardiac arrest, stroke, and most importantly, hyperthermia. Mr. London is going to explain to you how, well, the body has a natural cooling system. And when you're out in the hot Waco sun and you're playing soccer, you want to make sure that that cooling system is in tip-top shape. But cocaine compromises that. Because as I just said, you're going to hear cocaine constricts the blood vessels. And when the blood can't go to the skin can keep the body cool. And so your temperature is elevated. As the heat outside elevates, so does your body temp. And that can lead to a stroke. What you're going to hear is that the moment Rory stepped onto that field, knowing that she had ingested cocaine, just invited tragedy. Going back to September 7, 2018, we're here, and what you're going to hear is that Coach Reese Taylor saw that Rory was playing sloppy, and so she grew frustrated. So she sent Rory off to do something called Burma Road. Now, opposing counsel just described it as an extreme disciplinary method that put every single student at risk. What you're going to hear today, this was a tried and true tradition from Waco High. This is a tradition that had existed long before Coach had ever arrived back to coach soccer. And in fact, it was the same thing that she had to perform when she played at her alma mater. But you see, the Burma Road drill was short-lived because once again, Rory wasn't showing any symptoms. And once again, she was goofing off. And so to capture Rory's attention, she implemented a new disciplinary action, a slide tackle drill. Slide tackling isn't anything new. You're going to hear that, in fact, it was quite common during games. When you have a common play that can potentially be dangerous, you want to make sure that you're simulating it in a safe manner. But you see, when your star player is goofing off, you want to make sure that she's remaining alert, attentive, that she's focused. And so the best way that Coach Taylor thought she could get all of those is have Rory stand on one side and one by one have her teammates perform this tackle. What you're also going to hear today is not only was this a common play, but it was one that Rory had not only practiced, but perfected. Even during this, you're going to hear from trainer Merriweather and Coach Taylor that Rory didn't exhibit any symptoms. And in the middle, unfortunately, Rory collapsed. Mr. London's going to explain to you that cocaine was found in her blood by way of the toxicology report. When he describes the autopsy report, what he's going to tell you is that, yes, Rory's death was caused by sudden cardiac arrest, but the coroner was unable to determine what caused that cardiac arrest. Mr. Lund's going to tell you that, at least in part, it was caused by the cocaine. At the end of this trial, you and I are going to have a chance to speak one more time. We're going to get to talk about exactly what happened on September 7th, 2018, and how Rory's own choices put herself at risk. It's at that time that I'm going to ask you to find Coach Taylor not liable, because it wasn't the coach. It was the cocaine. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lighty. Is there any matters to take up with the court before I allow Ms. Coley to call her first witness?
Nothing from the plaintiff, Your Honor.
Ms. Lighty?
Nothing.
All right, just want to confirm then. With that, Ms. Coley, you may call your first witness.
Plaintiff calls Jordan Street.
Okay. Give me just a second. We need our witness to come online. Wonderful.
Can you hear me now?
We can. All right. Just to confirm, Ms. Coley, Ms. Lighty, are you also able to hear Mr. Street?
Yes,
Yes.
Your Honor.
All right. Witness, I'll assume you've been previously sworn, correct? And you may proceed, Ms. Coley.
Good morning. Can you see and hear me okay?
I can.
Please introduce yourself.
My name is Jordan Street.
Where do you live?
I live in Waco, Texas.
Do you have any children?
I had a daughter, Rory.
You said that you had a daughter.
Um,
What happened to Rory?
yeah, Rory died at soccer practice.
When did Rory die?
She died on September 7th, 2018. I can't forget the date.
Before we talk about her death, I want to take a moment and make sure that we get to know Rory. Mr. Street, could you open up Exhibit 3 for me on your computer? Let me know when you have it in front of you.
I have it up.
Do you recognize this photo?
Yeah, it's Rory.
Is this how Rory looked back in 2018?
Yes.
Your Honor, plaintiff offers Exhibit 3.
No objection, Your Honor.
There being no objections, Exhibit 3 shall be admitted.
May we display Exhibit 3 on screen?
You may.
Mr. Street, how old was Rory?
She was 18.
Where did she go to school?
Waco High School, same as me.
What did she like to do outside of school?
Regular teenager stuff, friends, TV. We'd go to T-Bones to get barbecue.
Had Rory said what she planned to do after high school?
She was planning to go to college.
So let's turn to September 7th, 2018. Were you there at soccer practice the day Rory died?
No, I was at work.
Do you know who coached the soccer team?
Yeah, Coach Taylor.
Now, the autopsy report, Exhibit 14, which is already in evidence, says that Rory died from sudden cardiac arrest. Before she went to the defendant's soccer practice that day, to your knowledge, had Rory been diagnosed with any heart problems?
Never, no problems.
Before she went to the defendant's soccer practice that day, to your knowledge, how many serious medical issues did Rory have?
None, no medical issues.
Thank you, Mr. Street. Pass the witness.
Ms. Lighty?
May I proceed?
You may.
Mr. Street, I want to start by apologizing for your loss. This will only take a few minutes. I just have a few questions for you, okay?
Yeah.
Mr. Street, you yourself were an athlete when you were a teenager, right?
Yeah, I also played soccer.
Right, and so you were extremely happy when Rory took up sports.
Of course. Yeah, I was very happy that my daughter was interested in the soccer and any athletics.
Right. And you were especially happy about soccer because, well, that's a passion that the two of you shared, right?
Of course. Yeah, I think any parent would be.
And since you were an athlete, you wanted to teach your daughter how to be a good athlete as well, right?
I wanted my daughter to succeed, absolutely.
And in order to succeed, Mr. Street, an athlete has to work hard, right?
Absolutely, as with anything.
An athlete has to stay driven.
Of course.
And you'd agree with me, it's really important to pay attention at both practices and scrimmages, right?
Right.
And it's even more important to listen to your coach.
It's important to listen to the coach. Yeah, absolutely.
But Mr. Street, part of being a capable athlete, in your opinion, was also being tough, right?
Toughness is the way that you build champions.
And you taught Rory to be tough, didn't you?
Of course. I taught her to be disciplined and tough.
Mr. Street, you taught Rory to play through the pain, correct?
I taught Rory to be disciplined and tough, and part of that is to make sure that you're playing hard, even if it hurts sometimes. That's true.
Mr. Street, you taught Rory to never show weakness, correct?
I taught her to play through the pain and to be tough. That's true. I certainly didn't teach her to play herself to exhaustion and to hurt herself.
And I understand that, Mr. Street, but you'd agree with me, you taught her to specifically never show weakness, right?
I certainly taught her to play through pain and to be disciplined. That's absolutely right. Never showing weakness is something that is an element of that type of discipline, but I certainly never taught her to play herself to exhaustion or to play herself, to a place where she hurt herself.
I understand. But most importantly, you taught Rory to never complain, didn't you?
Complaining and asking for help, in my mind, are two different things, just like discipline and punishment.
I understand that, Mr. Street, but I'm just going to bring you back to my question. You taught your daughter never to complain, correct?
Correct.
Because in your eyes, that's what made a champion.
Right.
And because you yourself were an athlete, you understand that sometimes even a star player like Rory needed a little bit of motivation.
As does any teenager. I think that there's a role for discipline.
Well, because sometimes Rory just wanted to goof off.
As does any teenager. That's correct.
And you'd agree with me that when someone goofs off, they get disciplined.
Disciplined, yes, but excessive punishment, no.
Mr. Street, I understand that you want to explain, but you just answer my question. When someone does goof off, they get disciplined, right?
Yes.
And you yourself believe that discipline is important for a child.
Yes.
Because again, in your opinion, you can't let them get away with being lazy and entitled, correct?
Yes, as with any child.
Now, since you played soccer, in fact, you played soccer at Waco High School, didn't you?
Yes.
And one of the disciplinary measures that Coach Taylor used was running Burma Road.
That's correct.
Mr. Street, back in your time at Waco High, you had to run Burma Road, didn't you?
I did, yeah.
And so, in fact, it was a tradition that existed long before Coach Taylor. Am I right?
Yes, absolutely.
And you'd agree that the Burma Road drill is a form of discipline, isn't it?
It's a form of discipline. I would agree with that wording.
And since you just said that you ran Burma Road, you'd agree with me that sometimes you were sent to Burma Road when you were dogging it, right?
Any player on our team, yeah, that was the discipline that was common.
And it was also used as a disciplinary measure if you weren't in the right position.
Correct.
So basically, if you were playing sloppy.
You could say that. I'd agree.
Mr. Street, as far as you know, Rory has never been injured by performing this drill before.
No, Rory hasn't been injured by performing Burma Road.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. Your Honor, no further questions.
Thank you. Ms. Coley, anything further for this witness?
Nothing further, Your Honor. May Mr. Street step down?
Mr. Street may step down. Ms. Coley, you may call your next witness.
Plaintiff calls Aubrey Saracen.
Ms. Saracen, if you can take the audio mute off and just confirm that you are able to hear us.
Yep, I can hear you. Can you guys hear me?
And let me just confirm, Ms. Coley, Ms. Lady, or Ms. Leidy, are you able to hear our witness?
Yes, Your
Yes,
Honor.
Your Honor.
All right, Ms. Saracen, I'll just remind you that all witnesses were previously sworn, and so you remain under oath. You understand that?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, Ms. Coley, you may proceed.
Good morning, Miss Saracen. Can you see and hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Aubrey Saracen.
How old are you, Miss Saracen?
I'm 18 years old.
What do you do for a living?
I'm a freshman at Rice University.
Did you know Rory Street?
Yes, I did.
How did you know Rory?
I mean, we knew each other our entire lives. We grew up together, played soccer together. We were always at each other's houses.
Let's talk about the defendant in today's case. Do you know Reese Taylor?
I do.
How do you know the defendant?
He was our soccer coach.
I want to be upfront about your relationship with the defendant. While she was your coach, what role did you have on the team?
So I was a central midfielder starting my junior year.
Did you always have a starting role on the team?
During my junior year, I did. Senior year, though, I had to split that position with the coach's daughter.
So at the time, how'd you feel about losing that full-time role?
I mean, I was upset.
You said you were upset about it at the time.
Yes.
How long ago was that?
About a year and a half now, I want to say.
So let's talk about the conditions, the day that Rory died. Did you see Rory that day?
I did.
Where?
I was at practice with her.
Miss Saracen, could you open up the document marked as Exhibit 9?
Yes. Hold on 1 second. Okay, I'm looking at it.
What is it?
It's our soccer field.
Is this how the soccer field looked on September 7th, 2018?
Yes.
Your Honor, plaintiff offers Exhibit 9.
Any objections?
No, Your Honor.
There being no objections, it shall be admitted.
And may we display Exhibit 9?
You may.
So, Miss Saracen, who decides when practice gets scheduled?
The coach does.
The day Rory died, what time did the defendant schedule practice?
It was after school. I want to say like 3:15.
How hot was it?
Oh, it was brutal. It was way over 100 degrees and really sunny out.
During practice, do you take water breaks?
We do sometimes. There's water on the side.
So who decides when the team takes a water break?
The coach.
The day Rory died, how many water breaks do you remember the defendant giving the team?
I don't remember there being any water breaks.
So let's talk about what the defendant had Rory doing at practice that day. Can you open up Exhibit 2 and let me know when you have that in front of you?
Okay, I have it up.
Do you recognize Exhibit 2?
Yes, it's an overhead view of our soccer field and where we practiced.
Is Exhibit 2 a fair and accurate depiction of the field where practice was held on September 7th?
Yes, it is.
Plaintiff offers Exhibit 2.
Any
Um,
objection?
I'm sorry, Your Honor.
I was asking any objection. I think you said no.
That's correct.
All right. There being no objection, Exhibit 2 shall be admitted.
And may we display Exhibit 2?
You may.
Mr. Matz, could we zoom in and rotate that image? Fantastic. Ms. Saracen, what's the blue box that we see?
So the blue box is our practice field. That's where we would actually practice.
And what's the red box?
That's Burma Road.
What is Burma Road?
It's a place where coach would send us if, we did something wrong at practice or ticked him off. It was kind of like our punishment.
So who decides when players get sent to Burma Road?
The coach does.
When a player gets sent to Burma Road, what do they have to do?
It's you sprint 30 yards and then you dribble a ball 30 yards, you score a goal, and then you get on your hands and feet and crawl the entire 60 yards back.
Who decides when a player gets to leave?
The coach does.
On September 7th, 2018, how many players were sent to Burma Road?
There were just 2.
Who was first?
I was first. I got sent in the beginning of practice.
And the second?
It was Rory.
Did you ever hear the defendant say why she sent Rory to Burma Road?
No, I remember the coach screaming at the top of his lungs and saying that he had been goofing off and he needed to go run it out because he was useless on the field.
Did the coach say anything about how long she wanted Rory to run?
She just said to run until you pass out.
How did Rory look while she was running and crawling on Burma Road?
I mean, we were right next to each other, maybe a few feet away, and she was really pale. She didn't look well.
Did she say anything to you about how she felt?
Yeah, she complained about her chest hurting. And that was out of character for her.
So let's talk about how Rory died. Did Rory finish practice on Burma Road?
No, we had been on Burma Road for a little bit, and then coach started screaming at her again.
Where did Rory go after Burma Road?
The coach instructed her to go back onto that practice field that was off at the side.
How close were you to the practice field?
I mean, I could see it. It was in looking distance, but I was pretty far away.
Does 20 yards sound about right?
That sounds about right.
How well could you see?
I mean, I could see everything that was going on.
So tell us, what happened when the defendant had Rory come back to the soccer field?
So Rory was, I mean, you could see she just was exhausted at that point, but she was standing in the field. And the coach said that every time he blew the whistle, Rory was going to dribble the ball down and a line of players, one at a time, was going to go and side tackle her.
Ms. Saracen, I want to get to the defendant's instructions in a second, but right now I want to get a sense of what Rory looked like before this drill began. Mr. Matz, can we pull Exhibit 3 back up on the screen? Now, we heard today that, Ms. Saracen, is this how Rory normally looked to you?
Yeah, that's Rory.
Is this how she looked when the defendant had all of the players line up across from her?
No, I mean, we always used to joke around about how pale she was and that she always needed to put on sunscreen, but she was so pale that day that it was almost lifeless. It, like, all the blood had like drained from her face. I mean, there was there was something wrong.
Did you see where her hands were?
Yeah, she was standing with her hands on her hips and she was breathing heavily. You could tell she was struggling and just exhausted.
So after the players lined up, what did they do?
So one at a time, the players would run towards her as she was dribbling the ball down, and they would side tackle her.
What's a slide tackle?
So it's basically when you run towards someone and you knock the ball out from under their feet.
When the first player slide tackled Rory, what did she do?
I mean, she handled it okay, but she fell down.
Then what happened?
And it was over and over and over again until she fell to the ground.
How many different players slide tackled Rory?
15.
How many times did Rory get knocked down?
15.
What happened after the 15th time Rory was knocked down?
I mean, she was just laying there and her body started shaking and convulsing, and we all gathered around and no one really knew what to do. And someone yelled to call 911 and then she stopped.
Miss Saracen, did you see Rory get up?
No.
We've talked about the last moments of Rory's life. Now I want to focus on what the defendant was doing. Before the players began tackling Rory, did you hear the defendant give any instructions?
Yes. He said that every time that he blew the whistle, a new player that was lined up on the line was going to sprint towards Rory and slide tackle her.
Before September 7th, how many times had you seen the defendant use this 15-on-1 tackle drill?
I had never seen this drill before.
When Rory got knocked down, did you ever see the defendant approach her?
Yeah. One of the times Rory fell down, she was on the ground and struggling to get up. And the coach grabbed her by the back of her jersey and brought her to her feet and yelled at her to keep going.
So after the defendant yanked Rory up by her jersey, what did she do?
I mean, she blew the whistle and another player started running towards Rory.
You said that the defendant told everyone to tackle Rory when she blew that whistle. How many times did the defendant blow her whistle?
15 times.
When did she stop?
When Rory was on the ground and she didn't get up.
Pass the witness.
Thank you. Ms. Slidey, you may proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Saracen, I understand that you and Rory were good friends, and I am sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
As you told us on direct examination, you and Rory had been teammates for a really long time, correct?
Yes.
Because the two of you had grown up together, right?
Yes.
You had grown up playing soccer together.
Yes.
And so you knew what a talent Rory was.
Yes.
In fact, on the Waco High varsity soccer team, you'd agree with me, Rory was the star player, wasn't she?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that. She was great.
You'd say that as the star player, Rory usually wasn't out of place.
I don't know what you mean by out of place.
Well, you have specific positions on the soccer team, right?
Oh, yes, I would agree.
So generally speaking, Rory would always be in the correct position.
Yes.
And she would be able to make easy passes to other teammates.
Yes, she was a really good player.
And especially Miss Saracen, when there was a wide open goal with no goalie and no defenders, Rory could easily make that too, couldn't she?
I'm sure that she could.
But on September 7th, 2018, you saw that there was something wrong with Rory, right?
Yes, I did after she came over to Burma Road.
And what you said specifically on direct examination is that she was, quote, acting out of character?
Yes. By complaining about her chest. She's such a strong person that she didn't really complain about things often.
And Miss Saracen, you noticed that on that day, Rory was playing sloppy, wasn't she? Or at least, if I may rephrase, you heard Coach Taylor saying that she was playing sloppy.
I think that's what it was about. I mean, I personally didn't see her when she was on the practice field before she came to Burma Road.
Right, but you did hear Coach Taylor say that to Rory?
Yes, I think that's what it was. He was yelling at her about that. I think he called her useless.
And well, I'm not asking what she said about whether or not she was useless on the field. I'm just asking if she was playing sloppy. And she was.
Don't know if she was personally playing sloppy.
Coach Taylor said that she was out of position.
Yes, that's what the coach said.
She was missing passes.
And that's what the coach said.
And she couldn't make those wide open shots that you said she normally could, right?
I personally don't know.
Right, but as far as Coach Taylor was saying.
Yes, the coach said that.
And so, as you just said, you weren't really looking at what was happening because you were over on Burma Road. Am I right?
Yes, that was in the beginning when I started running.
And then eventually Rory joined you in running those drills.
Yes.
Now, Burma Road isn't actually a road, right? It's a drill.
Yes.
And in fact, you and Rory were doing the exact same movements, weren't you?
Yes.
You were doing them side by side
Yes.
in the same Waco humidity.
Yep.
And for you, this was just another soccer drill that you had been repeating over and over again before Rory even showed up, correct?
That Burma Road was?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yes, I agree.
And you had been performing this drill for the last 15 minutes, correct?
Yeah, I want to say it was about 15 minutes.
But Miss Saracen, you weren't struggling, right?
I mean, I was hot. It was hard, but
in comparison to Rory, you weren't struggling.
yes, Rory was having a difficult time.
You said that after just a few minutes, Rory started complaining to you.
Yeah, she stated that her chest hurt.
And as you also said, she never usually complained.
Yes, it was out of character for her.
But Miss Saracen, at the time, you didn't know that Rory had showed up to practice with cocaine in her system, did you?
I have no knowledge of that.
Because she never told you, right?
She never said anything to me.
As you two were running this Burma Road drill, Rory never stopped to take a break, correct?
When we were running Burma Road, I mean, we talked for a couple minutes on the side, and that's when she complained about her chest, and I wanted to make sure she was doing okay.
She never stopped to go get some water, though.
No, she didn't.
She never stopped to go speak with the trainer, Jess Merriweather.
No, she was probably on the practice field at that point. I didn't think that she was watching.
Miss Saracen, I'm not asking about that. If I could bring you back to my question, Rory herself never stopped to go walk over to Miss Merriweather, correct? Or Mr. Merriweather.
No, she didn't.
And she also never stopped and walked over to Coach Taylor, correct?
No.
And as far as you can tell, Rory never told anyone else besides you about her problems.
I guess.
Is that a yes, as far as you know?
Yes. I mean, I don't know who she told and didn't tell, but as far as I know, I mean, I know.
Now, as you said on direct examination, Coach pulled her over to the practice field to perform the slide tackle drill, right?
Yes.
And you'd agree with me, slide tackling is a common play in the game of soccer.
Yes, doing it once is common, but doing it 15 times in a row isn't.
Miss Saracen, I'm just going to bring you back to my question. The play of slide tackling itself is a common one in the game of soccer, correct?
Yes.
In fact, in a game, it's common for that to happen multiple times, right?
I would say it's almost a rarity. I wouldn't say multiple times.
Is it your testimony today here, Ms. Saracen, that it's in fact a rarity for slide tackling to occur more than once during a game?
No, it would occur more than once during a game, but I wouldn't say multiple times as like, I think that's the wrong word to use.
Okay, so just so we're clear with the court, slide tackling can occur multiple times in a game, right?
It can occur more than once.
And as you said on direct, you've never seen this type of slide tackling drill done before, right?
Yes, I'd never seen that before.
But when you were watching this happen, you were 20 yards away, weren't you?
I was.
And it's your testimony that from that distance, you could tell that Rory looked pale.
Yes.
And you were so worried again at this time because this was out of character, correct?
Yes.
But Ms. Saracen, let's be clear, you never approached anyone about your concern for Rory, did you?
No, I wish that I had.
As your coach, you'd agree with me, Reese Taylor, well, her job is to make you better at soccer, right?
I guess you can classify it as that.
Well, that's what you'd expect from a coach.
Yes.
You'd also expect to be disciplined.
Yes.
You'd expect physical exertion.
Yes.
You'd expect to compete and practice out in the hot Waco sun.
Yes.
And in fact, you've done that time and time before, hadn't you?
Yes.
But Ms. Saracen, you're also expected to show up to practice clean and sober. Isn't that right?
Yes.
Thank you. Pass the witness.
Coley, anything further for this witness?
Yes, Your Honor. May I redirect the witness?
You may.
Ms. Saracen, opposing counsel just asked you a lot of questions about whether you and Rory were doing the same thing on Burma Road. Were you slide tackled 15 times that day?
No, I was not.
Pass the witness.
Your Honor, I have no recross. I'm fine with this witness being excused.
Thank you. Ms. Saracen, you may step down.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Ms. Coley, do you have any further witnesses to call?
Yes, Your Honor. Plaintiff calls Dr. Reagan McConaughey.
Give us just a moment to get our witness.
Hello.
Hello, Dr. McConaughey. How are you today?
Well, thank you.
Wonderful. Dr. McConaughey, I'm just going to confirm, are you able to hear both myself and Ms. Coley and Ms. Leidy, if you'll say something just very quickly?
Yes, I
Good
am.
morning.
Morning.
All right. And Ms. Coley and Ms. Leidy, are you both able to hear the doctor? Okay.
I believe so, Your Honor.
Okay. If I can ask Doctor, if you'll just say one more thing so we can confirm your audio is working correctly.
Hello?
Wonderful. Okay, you have a little bit of a soft-spoken voice, so I'm just going to ask if you can project a little bit more during the course of your testimony this morning. And I'll also just remind you that you were previously sworn and you remain under oath. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
All right, Ms. Cole, you may proceed. Thank you very much.
Good morning, Dr. McConaughey.
Good morning.
Please introduce yourself.
I am Reagan McConaughey.
What do you do for a living?
I am a cardiologist at McLennan Memorial Hospital.
What is cardiology?
It is a field of medicine that treats and takes care of patients who have heart disease.
How are you involved in today's case?
I reviewed the depositions and the autopsy report as well as the toxicology report today.
Were you asked to determine the cause of Rory's death?
Yes.
So before we talk about your conclusions, I want to get a sense of your credentials. Where did you go to school?
I did my undergrad training at Baylor University, where I had a bachelor's in science and biology and chemistry. And then I went to Baylor College of Medicine, where I got my medical degree.
Are you board certified to practice internal medicine?
Yes.
And what are some of your responsibilities as the chief of cardiology?
So I take care of patients on our service in the hospital, and I also oversee the other doctors within the department. And lastly, I participate in on-call or after-hours care of patients.
Before you were the chief of cardiology, had you ever seen patients?
Yes,
And how long have you been practicing medicine?
27 years.
Your Honor, we tender Dr. McConaughey as an expert in cardiology.
Slidey,
No objections.
there being no objections, the court will accept her as an expert. Ms. Cole, you may proceed.
Doctor, in forming a conclusion about the cause of Rory's death, what information did you rely on?
I looked at the depositions of several people who were at the event. I also looked at the toxicology report as well as the autopsy report.
Did you review a temperature report?
I did.
And what methods did you use to analyze that information you looked at?
Well, I take into account all of the things that were said and documented as well as the symptoms and compare them together to kind of determine what the cause of death is.
And is this method reliable?
Yes.
Did you apply this method reliably in this case?
Yes.
Were you able to form a conclusion about the cause of Rory's death?
Yes.
And were you able to form that conclusion to a reasonable degree of medical certainty?
Yes.
So, doctor, tell us, what was the cause of Rory's death?
Heat stroke.
What is heat stroke?
So heat stroke exists on a spectrum of disorders related to elevated temperatures. In this case, she was outside doing strenuous exercise and a hot day, and ultimately that led to cerebral edema and myocarditis, ultimately ending her life.
Doctor, you said a lot there, so I want to break it down. You said your conclusion was based on 3 sources of information, and I'd like to talk about them one at a time. Let's start with the autopsy. What did you learn from the autopsy?
The autopsy showed 2 findings. It showed cerebral edema, and it also showed myocarditis.
What is cerebral edema?
Edema is the medical term for what we colloquially call swelling. When it happens in the brain, it increases the pressure within inside the brain because the skull is a fixed object and fixed shape.
So how does the presence of a cerebral edema support the conclusion that Rory Street died from heat stroke?
During heat stroke, cerebral edema is, quite frankly, the last and life-ending part of the disease process. And so because she was quite hot and she was not allowed to cool and her brain was essentially breaking down as a result.
Now let's turn to that second source of information, the temperature report. What was the temperature at the time Rory died?
It looked to be 105 degrees.
And why is that significant?
Well, it certainly gives the impetus for this disease process to be in place. It's certainly hot enough that in appropriate settings, it could cause heat stroke.
Now I want to talk about that final source of information. When you reviewed the depositions of the people who were on the practice field when Rory died, what were you looking for?
I look for all sorts of symptoms. The ones that they specifically mentioned included difficulty breathing, looking pale, tired, confused, and having a racing heart or potentially some chest pain.
What are the most common symptoms of a heat stroke?
Can be paleness, can certainly be shortness of breath, can be chest pain, sweating.
So were the symptoms observed by the eyewitnesses consistent with a heat stroke?
Yes.
And I want to be clear about when Rory experienced those symptoms. When Rory showed these symptoms of heat stroke, doctor, what physical activities was she doing on the soccer field?
It was reported in the depositions that she was running, sprinting, crawling, working excessively by all accounts.
And according to the defendant's deposition, who instructed Rory to do those things?
It looks like it was Coach Taylor.
Pass the witness.
Thank you. Ms. Leidy, you may proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. Good morning, doctor.
Morning.
I want to first start by talking about cocaine. Now, as a cardiologist, you're familiar with that drug, right?
Mhm.
I'm sorry, is that a yes?
Yes, that is true.
I'm sorry, if you could just speak up just slightly.
Yes, I'm familiar.
Thank you. And you understand the effects that cocaine has on the heart in particular.
Yes,
You'd agree with me, you don't have to be a habitual user of cocaine to know the side effects, right?
that's correct.
You don't have to be a habitual user of cocaine to suffer the side effects.
That's correct.
In fact, you can use cocaine just once and suffer medical complications. Isn't that true?
Also correct.
And you agree that cocaine mixed with other factors that can raise the risk, right?
Yes, that's true.
Alone, cocaine can cause, well, stroke, right?
I suppose it's not the most common cause of death related to cocaine.
But it can happen.
Yes,
And in fact, as we just established, cocaine with other factors could potentially increase the risk of a stroke.
yes,
You'd agree that cocaine mixed with heat and physical exertion, that can increase the risk of heat exhaustion, right?
yes,
I'm sorry.
yes,
Thank you. As a medical doctor, well, I assume that you counsel your patients against the use of cocaine, right?
yes,
Against the use of cocaine in the heat,
yes,
against the use of cocaine in physical activity,
yes,
and against the use of cocaine in a combination of heat and physical activity, right?
yes,
One of the symptoms of cocaine use is something called hyperthermia, correct?
yes,
And because you're a cardiologist, you understand the seriousness of something like hyperthermia.
yes,
In fact, hyperthermia inhibits the body's natural cooling down process, doesn't it?
yes,
And it does so by constricting your blood vessels.
yes,
And doctor, when your blood vessels are constricted, well, the blood can't flow to the skin, correct?
yes, that's correct.
And when the blood can't reach the skin can't get cooled, right?
Yes,
And that can be risky, especially when you're out in the sun, right?
yes,
Doctor, I want to read you a portion from an article called Heat, Stroke, and No. Heat stroke and heat exhaustion, unlocking the keys to the heart. There's an article by Dr. Reginald Dwight. I just want to make sure I got the title there for you. I'm going to read this portion for you, and I'm going to ask if you agree with this statement. Thus, if cocaine use is combined with overexertion in extremely hot conditions, then it would only serve to exacerbate the risks associated with heat exhaustion and heat stroke, and that could lead to a cascade of symptoms associated with heat exhaustion and heat stroke. You agree with that statement?
Yes, I do.
And based on your review of the case file, regardless of the amount Rory ingested, Rory combined cocaine with physical exertion and heat exhaustion, just like that article said, correct?
Yes.
Now, one of the materials that you relied on was the deposition testimony, the deposition testimony of Aubrey Saracen, right?
Yes.
And from that, you gleaned the type of symptoms that Rory was exhibiting on September 7th, 2018.
Yes.
And from that, you determined that Rory exhibited signs of heat stroke.
Yes.
And the reason, let's be clear about this, the reason that you looked at Aubrey Saracen's deposition in particular is because not a single teammate had come forward and provided you any information about Rory's symptoms, right?
No other teammates.
Not the trainer, correct?
No.
And not Coach Taylor.
No.
And so what you learned from Aubrey and Aubrey alone, that Rory wasn't feeling fun, or was feeling funny, correct?
Yes.
That she looked really pale as she was doing these drills.
Yes.
And from what you understand of where she was positioned, while this slide tackle drill was going on, Aubrey was 20 yards away, wasn't she?
That's what was in the deposition, yes.
And Coach Taylor was right next to Rory, right?
I believe based on that testimony, yes.
Doctor, if someone is standing with their hands on their hips, slumped over and breathing hard, you wouldn't automatically assume that means that they're suffering from heat exhaustion, right?
I think it would be hard to say with that alone.
Right. So it's possible in this case that Rory was just tired when she did that.
If you're basing it only on that, yes.
All right. Now, it's your opinion here that she did die from heat stroke. So let's talk about some of the symptoms associated with it. You listed 14 different symptoms in your expert report, didn't you?
Yes.
Well, let's walk through those one at a time and see if what Rory exhibited matches that. Excessive thirst. That's one of the symptoms, right?
Yes.
From what you learned, Rory wasn't exhibiting any excessive thirst.
Well, thirst is a subjective symptom, meaning the person has to tell you that they feel that.
Right. And since, I apologize. Continue.
It's hard to witness someone else's thirst.
Right. So you would expect that person to communicate that to someone else.
Yes.
And from what you learned from Aubrey, Rory never said anything about being thirsty.
Not that I'm aware of.
You're also not aware of any evidence that she had weakness.
Well, it does talk about her falling to the ground multiple times. So I think that that could potentially be a sign of weakness.
Right, but let me be clear. She didn't fall to the ground on her own, correct?
I'm not sure I understand how else one would fall to the ground.
I could fall to the ground right now, couldn't I, right? Without anybody touching me?
Sure.
But that's not what happened to Rory, correct?
Well, it's had, I believe if I recall the testimony earlier, she was falling to the ground even while playing on the soccer field.
All right. Rory didn't tell anybody that she had a headache, correct?
Correct.
That's one of the symptoms of heat stroke.
Correct.
Another symptom is nausea.
Correct.
Rory never vomited on the field.
Well, yes, but nausea and vomiting are not the same. Nausea is the symptom of feeling like one will throw up, whereas vomiting is obviously the act of throwing up.
Okay, well then let's be clear. Rory never told anybody that she felt nauseous.
It's true, not based on the testimony that I have.
And based on the testimony that you have, like we just established, she never threw up.
It's true.
Another symptom is diarrhea, isn't it, doctor?
That's true.
Rory never had diarrhea.
Not that I saw.
Another symptom is muscle cramps.
Again, it would be hard to witness that without, having someone tell you, but that's true.
And I understand that, doctor. So let's talk about what Rory communicated. She never said she was having muscle cramps, right?
No, but one could argue that the reason she was falling was because of muscle cramps.
Doctor, I'm going to repeat that question. Rory never told anybody that she was having muscle cramps, correct?
That's correct.
Rory never told anybody that she was having abdominal cramps.
That's correct.
And you'd agree with me, abdominal cramps is another sign of heat stroke.
That's correct.
Another sign of heat stroke is profuse sweating, isn't it?
Correct.
Now, I can agree with you on this. Rory was profusely sweating, right?
That's correct.
But one of the other symptoms is rapid heartbeat.
Correct.
It's your opinion today that Rory had that?
I assume that based on the fact that she was having chest pain.
Right, but since you were there, obviously you don't know.
That's true.
And Rory never went to anybody to check that out.
Not that was reported, no.
Doctor, in this case, you reviewed something called the toxicology report, didn't you?
Yes.
And this toxicology report told you that there was cocaine found in Rory's blood.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
In fact, 60 nanograms per milliliter of cocaine.
Yes.
You agree with me that a finding of 60 nanograms per milliliter means one of two things. First, the amount ingested was only a nominal amount, right?
Yes.
And the second is that there was a great deal of time between the ingestion and the testing.
Yes.
You understand that Rory died around 5 p.m. on September 7th, 2018, don't you?
Yes.
And from the autopsy report, you understand that the blood was drawn and tested the next day, right?
Yes.
At 7:30 p.m.
Yes.
So that's a 26-hour delay, isn't it?
It is in terms of time, but her body would not be metabolizing cocaine because, of course, she had passed away.
Well, doctor, you're not a toxicologist, are you?
That's not my area of expertise, but we do toxicology as part of our routine medical training.
But just so I'm clear, that's not your expertise.
No.
So it's possible that the amount in Rory's system was actually higher than what appears on the toxicology report.
It's possible, yes.
Ask the witness.
Thank you, Ms. Leidy. Ms. Coley?
Your Honor. Yes, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Doctor, you were just asked a lot of questions about symptoms.
Yes.
Does someone have to exhibit all the symptoms of heat stroke to have a heat stroke?
No. No.
Now, you were also asked a lot of questions about cocaine. Were you here for the defense's opening statement where they mentioned cocaine as a possibility for the cause of death?
Yes.
Did you review the toxicology screen that mentions cocaine?
Yes.
Are you familiar with how cocaine affects the body?
Yes.
Were you able to form a conclusion about whether the cocaine caused Rory's death?
Yes, I will.
This calls for an improper expert opinion.
Coley, any response?
Your Honor, this is not an improper expert opinion. This witness has already been tendered as an expert in cardiology and that she was retained to determine the cause of Rory's death. If she determined that the cause was a heat stroke, that means that she determined that cocaine was not the cause of the heat stroke. She can testify to her conclusions.
And Ms. Lighty, I'll allow you one more response. Anything further?
Yes, Your Honor. Dr. McConaughey just established with me on cross-examination that toxicology is not her area of expertise. And so while she may understand how cocaine affects the body, to offer an opinion here today that cocaine had no part in her death would be outside of her expertise as a cardiologist.
Your Honor, if I may.
Ms. Coley, I'm going to sustain the objection. You have tendered the witness as an expert in cardiology and not in toxicology, so I'll certainly allow her to testify as to what she believes the cause of death to be, but as it relates to anything outside of her field of cardiology, she'll be restricted.
Yes, Your Honor. So, Doctor, informing your conclusions in today's case, what did you determine was the sole cause of Rory's death?
Heat stroke.
Pass the witness.
Thank you, Ms. Coley.
Your Honor, I have no recross.
All right. Doctor, you may step down. Thank you very much for joining us today. Y'all bear with me just for a moment. I'm writing down the final times.
Yes, Your Honor.
Plaintiff, I'm just going to confirm you have no further witnesses to present at this time. Is that correct?
That's correct.
At this juncture, Ms. Coley, I show that you have used 35 minutes of your time. All right. And Ms. Lighty, I show that you have used 36 minutes. Do either of you have any objection to my timekeeping at this time?
No.
Your Honor.
Okay. We are going, if there's no further witnesses from the plaintiff, going to take a break. However, I will inquire at this time whether there are any motions that you desire to take up with the court.
No, Your Honor.
Ms. Coley?
Nothing from the plaintiff, Your Honor.
All right. In light of that, then, if I can ask for all of our scoring judges to please turn their video and audio back on. Mr. Ryan? Ms. Atwood?
Hello?
Lenny? All right. Mr. Towner? Looks like, are we missing one?
This is Tara. I'm here. I'm still having trouble with my video.
Okay, but you are here, Tara?
I am.
Okay, wonderful. Well, then I think we have everyone. I am going to allow us to have a brief 5-minute recess to allow everyone to get a drink of water, a cup of coffee, or to use the facility if that is necessary. My watch, so if you'll just mark by my time, shows that we are exactly at straight up 11:30. And so I will ask everyone to return in 5 minutes at 11:35. Please mute your video and your audio while we were gone. We will return in 5 minutes time. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Miss Coley, we're supposed to leave our video on, right?
I have no idea, but I'm just going to leave it on.
Just want to make sure.
Yeah.
Your Honor, I'm here.
Y'all are more than welcome to go ahead and leave your video on, but step off camera and do take a break. We're giving you that opportunity before we proceed.
Thank you.
Thank
Yes,
you.
Your Honor.
I'm just going to confirm Ms. Coley and Ms. Leidy before we turn to defendant's witnesses. Anything further that either of you ladies need to take up with the court?
No,
Nothing
Your
for the-
Honor.
All right, lovely. Then Ms. Leidy, you may call your first witness.
Yes, Your Honor. This time we'd like to begin our case in chief by calling Coach Reese Taylor.
Coach Taylor, if you'll please take the stand. Hello, Coach. I'm just going to remind you, you do remain under oath, and if we can ask for you to speak, just so we can confirm your audio is working.
Is it working? Can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah, and your voice is a great tone. Some of ours have been a little bit more soft-spoken, so you're good. All right, then Ms. Leidy, you may proceed at this time, please.
All right. Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Would you please introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Reese Taylor.
Ms. Taylor, what do you do for a living?
I'm a coach for a living.
Well, where do you specifically coach?
I coach at Waco High, and I'm also a health teacher at Waco High.
What kind of sports do you usually coach?
Well, pretty much coach anything, but I've been coaching soccer for the past 20 seasons.
Have you received any education relating to athletics?
Yes, I graduated from Texas A&M, and I received a degree in, what is that name? It's the physical science.
Would it be physical education?
Yes, there we go. Thank you.
Well, as a coach at Waco High, Coach Taylor, what's your record like?
Actually, we've had a pretty good record for the past couple of years. For the past 6 years, we've won district 5 years in a row. We've also made it to the semifinals twice.
Well, sounds like a pretty impressive record, Coach Taylor. What do you do to ensure that you're being the best coach that you can possibly be?
I actually go to quite a few conferences during the year so that I can keep up my skills and the knowledge about what's going on in the field. That's either with a focus on high school or even college, sometimes professional. That way I can keep up to date and know the changes and things that are happening in the coaching industry.
Now, I want to be clear about something. Coach, how important is safety to you?
Oh my gosh, it's very important to me. I mean, all of the sports that I coach, they can be dangerous, and so safety is one of our biggest priorities.
Coach, do you understand why it is that you're here today?
Yes, I do.
Why is that?
One of the students that I coach, she passed away during one of our practices on September 7th of 2018.
And by she, who are you referring to?
I'm referring to Rory Street.
Could you describe your relationship with Rory?
I mean, we had a really great coach-student relationship. She was my star player on my soccer team. And I love all of my students as my own children. I care deeply about them. And so we had that same kind of relationship. And because she was my star player, not just because of that, but I mean, I really cared about her.
Well, you've mentioned a couple times that Rory was your star player. Can you describe the kind of soccer player that she was?
I mean, she was amazingly talented. She was, I saw the kind of talent in her that I saw the kind of talent and potential that she could actually do this in college, maybe professionally. And because of that, I wanted her to do her best always. And I pushed her to do her best because she was so talented.
Well, in your opinion, was Rory always living up to her full potential at practices, scrimmages, and games?
I mean, sometimes she would goof off. She was a teenager, and that did happen. It was a natural occurrence that happened. She would sometimes goof off, not her full potential when she was doing that.
What about on September 7th, 2018? Was Rory goofing off then?
Yes, that was one of the practices where I felt like the whole practice, she was goofing off.
Well, Ms. Taylor, let's walk through how that practice started that afternoon. What time did you call everyone to the field?
About 3.
Can you tell us what the weather was like?
I mean, it was a sunny day. I think the temperature was about 103 when we started practice, a typical weather for that part of the season.
Had you performed practice or held practices or scrimmages in this kind of heat before?
Yes, pretty much every day. If it's that heat, we're out there working.
And was Rory in attendance at each and every one of these practices and scrimmages where you were out in this kind of heat?
Yes, she was.
Can you explain for us, why is it if it's so hot that you actually hold practices then instead of at a later time?
So we actually hold practices at that time because a lot of times our games are at that temperature, and we are trying to slowly condition the players to be able to accept that kind of heat. If we do practices only at night, they won't be able to perform as well or safely if we have a game where it's really hot outside.
Coach, before we delve into exactly what happened with Rory that afternoon, I want to lay out some of your expectations for your players. When they show up to practice, what do you expect from them?
I expect them to be focused and committed and paying attention and trying their best at whatever drill or scrimmage that we're doing that day.
And I want to be clear about this, Coach. What's your expectation as far as drugs are concerned?
I expect that all of my players are showing up completely sober. We have a zero tolerance policy for that. I would never let one of my players step onto either the practice field or an actual field if I knew they had drugs in their system or alcohol.
So on September 7th, 2018, were you aware that Rory Street walked onto your field with cocaine in her system?
No, I had no idea.
And if you had known, would you have let her continue to play?
Absolutely not.
Would you have performed these drills?
No, absolutely. I would never have let her step onto the field if I knew she had any substance in her system.
All right, well, that puts Rory on the field. Let's talk about exactly how she was performing. Can you describe for us, if she was such a star player, what was so wrong with her that day, in your opinion?
So she was goofing off that day. She was missing passes. She wasn't making passes that were very easy to her co-players. She was missing goals that were wide open. Very uncommon for her. I mean, she was my star player. These things normally come very naturally and easy to her, and she was just missing all of those.
And so when you saw that Rory was missing all of these easy plays and passes, what did you do?
I sent her to run the Burma Road.
Now, we've heard a little bit about Burma Road throughout this trial today. Can you describe from a coach's perspective what that's meant to do?
So the Burma Road, it's a tradition at Waco High. We've had it. I mean, when I played, we had the Burma Road, and it's something that's used as a discipline. If one of the players isn't either working hard enough or they're goofing off, we send them to Burma Road, and it's meant to focus them so that they realize maybe those actions weren't what they should have done, and so that when they get back on the field, they're more focused about what they need to be doing.
And in your opinion, since you're the one telling them to go run these drills, do you think that this kind of a drill is safe?
Yes, I would never have my players do a drill that I didn't think was safe.
Would you ever make a player go perform Burma Road as a form of punishment?
No, it's a discipline so that they are more focused. It's not a punishment.
So you said that you sent Rory over to run Burma Road. In your opinion, how exactly was she performing?
On Burma Road?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I felt like she was goofing off on Burma Road too, just like she was when we were doing our scrimmage.
And from what you could tell of how she was performing, did it appear to you that she was struggling or falling over?
No, not at all. From what I could tell, it seemed like she was goofing off, not taking the drill seriously.
In your opinion, did you feel as though she couldn't handle the Burma Road drill from what you could see?
No, and I mean, she's run it before too, and it was different from before because she was goofing off.
Had Rory ever been injured doing Burma Road?
No.
So now that we have Rory goofing off over at Burma Road, what did you do next?
Well, at that point, I called all the players together to do a different drill where we had the players, I had them lined up and had them run and practice their side tackles.
Now, Ms. Taylor, you've been in court the entire time, right? We're with us at least on the Zoom call the entire time?
Yes, I have.
And you've been listening to what each and every one of the witnesses has been saying about that particular drill, haven't you?
Yes, I have.
So you've heard it be described as something new. Is that true?
It's new in the sense that we had never done this specific drill. Yes, but slide tackling, practicing slide tackling, that's something that we do because it is part of the game.
Had Rory practiced slide tackling?
Oh, yes, definitely.
So if this is a new drill, why did you set it up the way that you did with 15 of the teammates against Rory?
So this drill in my mind was to try and focus Rory. She'd been goofing off the entire practice, and slide tackling is one of those things. It helps your reflexes and learning how to avoid the slide tackle. It helps your reflexes. It focuses a player, and my star player goofing off, I was trying to do what I could to get her back on track, because when she goofs off, the rest of the players, they look up to her and they follow her example.
About how far away were you when Rory was performing this new slide tackle drill?
I can't remember exactly. I think I was about 10 meters away.
What, yards or so?
Yards or so. Yeah, not meters, yards, sorry.
Now, Coach Taylor, being that close to Rory, could you tell if Rory was struggling or in pain?
She didn't seem like she was struggling or in pain. From there, it seemed, I mean, she seemed like a normal amount of tired for us practicing, but nothing completely out of the ordinary.
At any point, were you concerned for Rory's safety during this drill?
No, if I get concerned for a player's safety, we stop the drill.
Coach, at any point, did Rory express concern for her own safety?
No.
At any point, did Rory go over to the trainer that you have on staff, Jesse Merriweather, and complain to them as far as you know?
No.
Can you tell us what happened to Rory during this exercise?
Well, after we'd been running it for a while, Rory fell to the ground, and unfortunately, she passed away before paramedics or anything could arrive on the scene to save her.
I want to be clear for this, because we heard from Aubrey Saracen that each and every time this exercise was performed, you would walk up, you would yank Rory back up to her feet and tell her, do it again. Did you say that?
No.
Did you do that action of yanking her up to her feet?
No, absolutely not.
When you sent her over to Burma Road, Aubrey said that you yelled, run until you pass out. Did you say that either?
No, I would never want one of my players to run until they pass out. That's extremely dangerous.
Coach, when you implemented this new slide tackle drill, did you do so because you were trying to punish Rory?
No, this was a drill. I wanted to hone focus and reflexes. And I mean, slide tackles are part of the game. You have to be prepared for them. And I was just trying to get Rory focused on the drill and on our practice.
Do you feel at all responsible for what happened to Rory while on your soccer field?
No, I don't feel like there was anything I could have done.
Ask the witness.
Foley?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Good morning, Ms. Taylor.
Good morning.
How are you doing today?
As best I can.
I want to talk to you about your priorities. You're proud of your coaching record, right?
Yes.
You've won your district.
Yes.
You won your region,
Yes.
but you never won the state championship.
No.
And you'd like to win the state championship.
I mean, I think that's every coach's hopes and goals. Yes.
Now, Rory Street was one of the best players you'd ever coached, right?
Yes.
2018 was your last chance to win with Rory on the team.
Yes.
But you'd agree that a coach should never put winning over safety.
Yes, I'd agree.
And you coach high school students,
Yes.
teenagers.
Yes.
And when you're coaching high school soccer, safety should always come first.
Yes.
So let's talk about safety standards. In June 2018, you attended a meeting run by the Texas High School Soccer Coaches Association, right?
Yes.
And that was the annual coaches meeting.
I believe so. Yes.
Miss Taylor, you have an exhibit notebook in front of you, right?
Yes, I do.
Could you open up exhibit 11 and just let me know when you have that in front of you?
I have it in front of me.
Exhibit 11 is the PowerPoint slides from that meeting we were talking about.
Yes.
And it's a fair and accurate copy of those slides.
It looks like it. Yes.
Your Honor, plaintiff offers exhibit 11.
Slidey, any objection?
Yes, Your Honor, object to hearsay.
Your Honor may be heard.
You may.
This is not hearsay because we're not offering this document for the truth of the matter asserted. It goes to the defendant's knowledge.
Slidey, any response?
Your Honor, so long as it's not being offered for the truth and argued as such, we're fine with that.
Then it shall be admitted.
And Your Honor, may we display exhibit 11?
You may.
I want to compare what the High School Soccer Coaches Association told you in June with how you ran your practice in September. Now here it says, when the temperatures reach 100 degrees, coaches must give their players breaks. Right?
Yes, that's what it says.
Coaches must give their players breaks every 15 minutes.
That's what it says. Yes.
On September 7th, 2018, the temperature was 104 degrees.
Yes, I think so. It started out with 103 for sure. I know that.
So it was at least 103 degrees.
Yes.
At the time Rory Street collapsed, she had been practicing for more than an hour.
Yes, that seems about right.
So if you'd followed these guidelines, Rory should have gotten at least 4 breaks.
Yes, if I'm doing my math correctly.
Well, Miss Taylor, you can't tell us if you gave your team 1 break on September 7th.
I mean, we take regular breaks. I don't remember how many we took that day, but we do take regular breaks.
Miss Taylor, that's not what I asked you. I asked you if on September 7th, you can tell us if you gave your team a single break.
Based on the fact that we take breaks every practice, I would say that there was a break that day.
Ma'am, you remember being deposed in this case, right?
Yes.
You were told to be truthful.
Yes.
You were told to be complete.
Yes.
Include all relevant information.
Yes.
And you'd recognize a copy of that deposition if you looked at it today, right?
Yes.
Now I want you to open up in your exhibit notebook your deposition. It's called Deposition of Reese Taylor. And I'll open it up with you. Mr. Matz, can we change the video view, please? Thank you. So, Ms. Taylor, do you have that document open?
Yes, I do.
And that's a fair and accurate copy of your deposition, right?
Yes.
It's got your signature on the back, on the last page, excuse me.
Yes.
And when you signed that document, you agreed that you were going to be complete.
Yes.
Ma'am, nowhere in this deposition do you say that you gave your team a water break on September 7th, 2018. Is that true?
I don't remember every single word I said in here. I don't know if I was asked the question about a break.
Ma'am, I didn't ask you if you were asked the question. I'm asking you if anywhere in this document it says that you gave your team a break on September 7th, 2018, and it does not say that.
Well, if I wasn't asked, I mean, it may have not come up in this if I wasn't asked the question, is what I'm trying to say.
Ma'am, you just testified that you told us that you usually give your team a break, right?
Yes,
So you talked about giving water breaks in your deposition.
I don't remember. I mean, this is a kind of long document. It's 15 pages. I don't remember how many times I talked about a water break in there.
Ma'am, that wasn't my question. You talked about water breaks in this deposition, correct?
I do not remember. Can you show me a line that I can look at?
Sure. Court's indulgence, Your Honor.
Certainly, Ms. Coley, feel free.
Actually, Coach Taylor, I have a better idea. You know how to use the control find function on your computer, right?
Yes.
Can you control find for the phrase water break?
I didn't find any results for water break.
Can you control find for the word break?
There's not a result for break, which means I also wasn't asked the question about it either.
So, ma'am, a moment ago when you said that you told us at your deposition that you usually give water breaks, that's not true.
I believe I said I didn't recall whether or not I said that.
So, ma'am, just to be clear, in your deposition, you never said that you gave your team a water break on September 7th. Is that true?
Your Honor, at this point, I would object that this is an improper impeachment. May I be heard?
Ms. Coley, I'm going to ask for you to move along.
Yes, Your Honor. So let's talk about what you had Rory doing at practice that day. During the scrimmage, you saw Rory miss some easy shots.
Yes.
You saw that Rory had made some bad passes.
Yes.
You told us on direct examination that this was unusual for Rory.
Yes, it was. Normally she doesn't goof off like that.
But you didn't decide to pull Rory aside and say, Rory, what's wrong?
Well, when a player's goofing off, you don't pull them aside and ask what's wrong.
Ma'am, that wasn't my question. You didn't pull Rory aside and say, Rory, what's wrong?
No, I didn't feel that was necessary for a player who's goofing off.
You didn't ask her, hey, are you okay?
No.
You didn't say, Rory, why don't you grab some water?
No, that's not the reaction to someone who's goofing off.
Ma'am, I didn't ask you if that's how you react to someone goofing off. I'm simply asking you if you ever said those words. Rory, maybe you should get some water.
I don't believe I did.
Instead, you chose to discipline Rory.
Are you referring to Burma Road?
Yeah, and I want to talk about what Burma Road looks like. You said you use Burma Road to teach players a lesson.
It's more of a discipline, especially if players are goofing off or not doing what they're supposed to be doing in a practice.
Ma'am, I didn't ask you whether it was for students who are goofing off. I asked you if you use Burma Road to teach players a lesson.
I wouldn't call it teaching players a lesson. It's a discipline for what I just said. If players are goofing off, not doing what they're supposed to in practice.
Ma'am, could you pull up that deposition again?
Sure.
And could you turn to page 6?
1 second. Okay, I'm on page 6.
Your Honor, directing court and counsel's attention to page 6, line 9. What is Burma Road? It's a tradition here at Waco High. I ran it when I was in school back in the 90s. Basically, it's a tool we use to motivate the athletes, sort of teach them a lesson, which is exactly what I wanted to do to Rory that day. You can close that document, Ms. Taylor. So when a player is running Burma Road, first the player sprints 90 feet.
No, it's 30 feet. Or, 30 yards, sorry. Is that what you mean?
30 yards is 90 feet, yes?
Then yes.
Then they dribble at top speed for another 90 feet.
Yes.
They shoot at an open goal.
Yes.
And if they miss, well, they have to start over.
Yes.
But if they score, they have to bear crawl.
Yes.
180 feet.
Yes.
And when they're done bear crawling 180 feet, they have to do those steps again.
Yes, if we're going to continue the drill, they do.
Over and over.
I mean, unless we ask them to stop before then, but yes.
Well, then let's talk about when they stop. They don't stop when they're tired. Yes?
I mean, it depends. Sometimes I guess it would depend. I'm sorry, I don't understand your question. Can you ask it again?
Ma'am, the only time a player can stop is when you tell them they can stop.
Yes.
So let's talk about when Rory stopped on September 7th. You watched Rory as she ran Burma Road, right?
Not exclusively. I was also watching the scrimmage, but yes, I did see Rory while she was running Burma Road.
You thought she wasn't moving at her normal speed.
I thought she was goofing off.
Ma'am, I didn't ask you if she was goofing off. I asked if you thought she wasn't moving at her normal speed.
I would say that my answer to that would still be I thought she was goofing off. That could be the speed thing, or it could be lots of other things.
Ma'am, you thought she was goofing off because she wasn't moving at her normal speed.
That was part of it, yes.
But you didn't pull Rory aside and say, Rory, what's wrong?
No.
You didn't ask, are you okay?
No.
You didn't say, maybe you should get some water.
No.
You chose to impose a second type of discipline on Rory.
We ran another drill after that, yes.
You had 15 players get in a line.
Yes.
And when you blew your whistle, the first player would slide tackle Rory.
Yes.
Then you'd blow your whistle and the next player would slide tackle Rory.
Yes.
And you told us on direct examination that this wasn't a punishment.
Correct.
You just called it a drill.
Yes, a drill.
But you'd never use this slide tackling to discipline your own child at practice.
I mean, I don't recall if we've done this drill again, but we use drills all the time.
Man, I'm talking about this specific drill. You had never used it on your own child at practice, right?
I mean, we've run different slide tackling drills, maybe not this specific one.
Your Honor, motion to strike is non-responsive.
Ms. Lighty, any response?
Your Honor, I believe Coach Taylor is responding to the best of her ability that she had run slide tackle drills, but she agreed with Ms. Coley, not this specific one.
Ms. Coley, you can ask the question again.
So, Ms. Taylor, you had never used this slide tackling drill to discipline your own child at practice.
Objection, Honor, relevance as well.
I'm going to allow the witness to answer.
At practice before this time? I'm sorry, I'm confused. Can you say it again?
Coach Taylor, you have never used this slide tackling drill to discipline your own child in practice ever.
No, that day was the first day that we had run that drill. So
sorry, Your Honor. Did someone say something?
No, I think the witness was trying to complete her answer.
My apologies. I didn't mean to interrupt anybody. So Coach Taylor, I want to be clear. Before September 7th, you'd never used this drill on Aubrey Saracen, excuse me.
Not this specific slide tackle drill, no.
So the first time you chose to impose this discipline, it was in 104-degree heat.
Yes.
The first time you chose to impose this discipline, it was on a player who had already been running and crawling on Burma Road.
Yes.
So let's talk about what happened when you used this slide tackling drill to discipline Rory. After the first person slide tackled Rory, you didn't stop the discipline.
I didn't stop the drill, no.
It didn't stop the discipline after Rory was tackled for a second time.
No.
You didn't stop the discipline until Rory had been tackled 15 times.
Yes, I believe it was either 14 or 15.
You didn't stop the discipline until Rory collapsed.
No.
Pass the witness.
Ms. Leidy,
Redirect, Your Honor.
you may.
Coach Taylor, opposing counsel asked you a lot about why you never approached Rory. Can you explain to us why you never asked her to go take a break or whether she was okay?
I mean, whenever we were in that practice, I thought she was goofing off. That's what it looked like. She looked like she was goofing off, wasn't focused. It didn't look like she was tired. It didn't look like she was distressed. I mean, it didn't look like she was more tired than we are in practice, because practice is tiring. But she didn't look like she was exhausted to a point where I needed to pull her aside for something like that.
And so, Coach, why didn't you stop the discipline at any point during that practice?
Because I never saw any signs from her that anything was wrong other than some goofing off.
Your Honor, I have no further questions.
Thank you, Ms. Leidy.
May this witness be excused pending no recross?
Your Honor, there's no recross from the plaintiff.
All right. Thank you. You may be excused. Ms. Leidy, you may call your next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, we'd like to call trainer Jess Merriweather to the stand, or the Zoom living room stand.
That's okay?
It is. We're waiting for the witness. All right. We just need to do a sound check. Can you please talk so that we can ensure that we're able to hear you, please, sir?
Yes. Good morning. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, thank you so much. All right, Ms. Coley, Ms. Leidy, just to confirm, you're able to hear our witness, correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor.
And I'm just going to remind you, sir, that you do remain under oath, having been previously sworn. And with that, Ms. Leidy, you may proceed with your second witness.
Please introduce yourself.
My name is Jess Merriweather. I'm the head trainer at Waco High School. I also teach health classes as well.
What sort of educational background do you have that allows you to serve in both of those positions?
I have a master's degree in athletic training from Texas A&M College Station.
Well, you said that you're a trainer at Waco High. Do you work with Coach Taylor, or have you worked with Coach Taylor?
On many occasions, of course. I work with all of the coaches, most of the sports teams, even sometimes with the theater department if they're doing something extremely athletic. So I work with all of the coaches.
What about on the soccer field?
Oh, specifically with Coach Taylor. You know, she's a winning coach. I'm with her almost all of the time.
Oh, Mr. Merriweather, are you familiar with someone named Rory Street?
Of course. Rory was, you know, I hate to use the term star, but she was a very, very good soccer player.
How would you describe Rory on the field? What was her temperament like?
Rory had an amazing amount of natural talent. She was a very, very good soccer player that we all thought that if she could apply herself, she was going to be able to take, you know, long-term success out of her soccer playing. more than likely she'd have been getting scholarships, maybe even pro someday.
Well, you described her as having so much potential. Do you ever have any disciplinary issues with her?
Yeah, she was undisciplined on a lot of occasions. She was a teenager, so some of that was just, her focus, messing around, goofing off sometimes. Other times it really was because she was so good that, training an athlete of that level can be really hard sometimes, where they don't give 100%, because, a percentage of their talent is enough to get them by.
All right, Mr. Merriweather, I want to move on to September 7th, 2018. Were you on the field that day?
I was.
And were you able to see what Rory was doing as far as practice went, or the scrimmage went, rather?
I wasn't focused on Rory specifically. I was there as athletic trainer, and there had been some other health issues that I was focused on, but I saw that she was there that day. Yes, of course.
And from what you were able to see, Mr. Merriweather, did Rory appear to be in distress to you?
Oh, never. Not at any point. She never expressed that to me. She never shared that with me. And my students are trained that if something's not right, something doesn't feel right, something is off, they're the ones who know their bodies best, and that they're supposed to come to me or to coach and let us know something's not right.
So as far as you know, have Rory ever approached Coach Taylor about the fact that she was in distress?
That day, no, not that I'm aware of at all.
When you saw, or did you see her performing these slide tackle drills?
I was wrapping another student's foot at the time, but I saw that the drill was taking place.
And from what you were able to see, Mr. Merriweather, did it appear like Rory was stumbling or slowing down?
Not that I could see. No more than, it was hot that day. So it's certainly none of us were operating at our top speeds and top ability that day just because of the heat. But I saw nothing in her doing that drill, nothing that would make me go over and say, hey, stop for a second here. I need to check on Rory.
And if you thought that there was something wrong with Rory, would you have approached her to help?
Oh, definitely. Any of my students, and my students can tell you that if I see something that there doesn't look right, maybe they're limping or they're moving a way that they haven't moved in the past, or something looks wrong, I will intervene. And I just didn't see it that day.
You told us that you work closely with Coach Taylor. Mr. Merriweather, as far as breaks are concerned, are the athletes allowed to take breaks?
Anytime they need them. Anytime they need them.
I'm sorry, continue.
No, I was just about to say, it's just something that our students know. They need to grab water. They need to come to me because they're hurt. They need to, for whatever reason, the students are allowed to take the breaks. The health of our students is top priority at Waco High.
And as far as you know, are they required to approach you to go ask for something as simple as water?
No, generally not. My guess would be that if something were off, they may come to me and say, hey, can I have some water? And would you also tell me about or talk to me about this other problem? But no.
Objection, Your Honor. Speculation. This witness just testified that his guess would be this is what the students would do.
Witness has already testified. We'll go ahead and proceed.
So, Mr. Merriweather, from your experience with Rory, if she actually was in pain and distress that day, would you have expected her to come talk to you?
Yes, is the short answer on that. Rory was not a new soccer player. She was not a new athlete. She knew how things worked. She knew to come to us if something were hurting, if something were wrong, and she needed to share that with us. All of the students know that.
Pass the witness.
Thank you, Ms. Coley.
Your Honor, would it be possible to quickly get a time check before my cross-examination? I just want to make sure that we have the same time.
Give me just a moment.
Thank you, Your Honor. I appreciate it.
Right now, Ms. Leidy, I have that you have 20 minutes remaining. And prior to beginning cross-examination, Ms. Coley, I have that you have 24.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Any objections to the court's time?
No, Your Honor, that checks out with us.
Lovely. Then Ms. Coley, you can proceed.
Good morning, Mr. Merriweather.
Good morning.
How are you doing today?
Under the circumstances, I'm fine.
I want to talk to you about how the defendant treated Rory during practice just before her death. The defendant scheduled soccer practice on September 7th, 2018, correct?
Yes.
He scheduled that practice for a summer afternoon.
Yeah, she did.
That afternoon, it was over 100 degrees.
This is Waco, Texas, ma'am. There's lots of afternoons that are over 100 degrees.
And that afternoon was one of them.
Yes, ma'am.
You're an athletic trainer, right?
Yes, ma'am.
You teach health.
Yes.
So you know that playing sports in 100-degree heat can be dangerous.
Oh, yes, of course.
And that afternoon, you saw Rory running Burma Road, right?
Yes.
You said that she looked fine.
From my vantage point, yes.
But you weren't watching her closely.
I wasn't by her side when it happened, no.
Sir, that wasn't my question. I asked if you were watching her closely.
My job is to watch all of the athletes and to make sure that I understand, more or less where they're health-wise, how they're doing. But no, I was not specifically watching Rory. I was not specifically watching any other student except those who had come to me, needed ankles wrapped, things like that.
So that's a yes to my question. You weren't watching Rory closely.
Yes.
But what you do know is that Burma Road involves running,
Yes, ma'am.
involves sprinting,
Yes, ma'am.
crawling.
Yes.
And on direct examination, you talked about seeing Rory do what you called a slide tackle drill, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Again, you said she looked fine,
Yes.
but you weren't watching her closely.
Defining closely is really hard. My job is to watch all of these athletes, looking for things that, if someone starts limping, if someone has trouble breathing, if someone is having trouble, to notice these kinds of things. But no, I was not by her side when she was being disciplined.
Sir, I'm using your words here. You were not watching Rory closely.
If what the answers you're looking for is no, no, I was not watching her closely. I was watching all of the athletes equally.
But you were watching Rory closely enough to tell that she was getting slide tackled by other players.
I could see from where I was that yes, she was doing that drill. Mm-hmm.
But you had never seen the defendant do this exact drill before, had you?
This exact drill, no. But slide tackle drills are pretty common in soccer.
You didn't see anyone else getting slide tackled in this drill?
No, ma'am.
Just Rory?
Yes, ma'am.
So the only person getting tackled in that drill is the only person who died. Yes?
Yes, ma'am.
Pass the witness.
Thank you, Ms. Coley. Ms. Leidy, anything further for this witness?
No, Your Honor. May this witness be excused?
Yes, Mr. Merriweather, you are excused. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Ms. Leidy, do you have a further witness to call?
Yes, Your Honor. We'd like to close out our case in chief by calling our expert witness today, Mr. Spencer London.
Mr. London, if you could please take the stand.
that I managed to do.
Thank you for joining us, sir. I'm just going to confirm, can you please speak so we're able to confirm that we're able to hear you?
Yes, my name is Spencer London.
All right, wonderful. And Ms. Coley and Ms. Lighty, just to confirm, you are able to hear the witness, correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, and sir, I'll just remind you, you have been previously sworn and you remain under oath. Do you recall that?
Yes, I understand, Your Honor.
All right. I'm just going to remind everyone at the conclusion of the last witness, at this time, Ms. Lighty, you have 20 minutes remaining, and Ms. Coley, you have 21. With that, Ms. Lighty, you may proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Could you please introduce yourself to the court?
Yes, my name is Spencer London.
Mr. London, what exactly is it that you do for a living?
I am a toxicologist.
Can you describe for us what a toxicologist does?
A toxicology is just the field of testing people for contaminants or drugs or other things that might be in their system.
And so as a toxicologist, are you aware how these contaminants and drugs affect the body?
Yes, we also study the physical and mental and physiological effects.
Well, Mr. London, how exactly are you involved in today's case?
I was asked to review some of the information in the case today, including a toxicology report and an autopsy report, as well as some deposition testimony.
All right, well, before we get into your opinion, I'd like to discuss your background.
Okay.
What sort of education have you received?
I have a bachelor's of science in toxicology.
Are you a member of any associations?
Yes, I'm a member of 3 of the more eminent professional associations for toxicologists.
And as a toxicologist, what kind of methods and principles do you typically rely upon?
Well, I always try to rely on principles of toxicology that are generally accepted in that field.
And are those the methods that you applied to this case?
Absolutely, yes.
Did you reliably apply them to the facts here?
Yes, I believe I did.
Did you come to an opinion, without telling us what it is, did you come to an opinion?
Yes, I have an opinion that I plan to offer in this case.
And is that opinion offered to a reasonable degree of medical certainty?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, at this time, we tender Spencer London as an expert in toxicology.
Coley, any objection?
No, Your Honor.
There being no objections, he shall be tendered as an expert in toxicology.
All right, well, Mr. London, now that we know exactly who you are and what you do, why don't you tell us what that opinion is?
My opinion is that to a reasonable degree of medical certainty, the soccer player in this case died because of cocaine use, in whole or at least in part.
Can you tell us exactly what cocaine is?
Cocaine is a narcotic. It's an illegal narcotic, and it is it is made out of coca leaves, and it's generally a stimulant that causes a euphoric feeling for the user.
And besides euphoria, Mr. London, what other effects can cocaine have on the body?
Well, cocaine has a number of negative effects on the body that range from nausea, vomiting, altered mental state, disorientation. It affects the muscles, tremors, that sort of thing can damage muscles. It can affect the brain. It can cause edema and inflammation. And then, of course, as is relevant to this case particularly, it can cause the condition known as hyperthermia.
You just mentioned hyperthermia. Can you explain what that is?
Sure. So cocaine being a stimulant, it has any number of effects on the heart. It increases heart rate. It can cause arrhythmia, which is an irregular heartbeat. It can increase blood pressure. And one of the effects that cocaine has on the cardiovascular system is it's a vasoconstrictor, which is to say it constricts or makes blood vessels smaller and makes blood flow, blood circulation more difficult for the body, for the heart. And that in turn affects the body's ability to cool itself, which is what the term hyperthermia means, increased body temperature beyond that which is normal for the body.
Well, Mr. London, if you can't regulate your body temperature, how does that increase the risk of a heat stroke?
Well, it increases the risk greatly because you're now you're essentially taking the environmental factors that might cause a heat stroke and exacerbating those because your body is not able to regulate its temperature regardless of external factors once you introduce cocaine into the equation.
Mr. London, a couple minutes ago, you told us that you reviewed a toxicology report. Did I hear that right?
Yes, I reviewed a toxicology report related to Rory Street.
Do you by chance have that in front of you, maybe contained within a notebook?
Yes, let's see.
If not, I can pull it up on the screen for you.
Yeah, would you mind doing that?
Mr. White? Mr.
Okay.
London, does this appear to be the toxicology report that you reviewed?
Yes, it is.
Does it appear to be an accurate and fair report that you would base your opinion off of?
That's correct. Yes, it is.
Your Honor, at this time, we offer the toxicology report into evidence.
Ms. Coley, any objection?
No, Your Honor.
There being no objections, it shall be admitted.
Mr. London, based on this toxicology report, why is it that you believe that cocaine had an effect in this case?
Because a toxicology report was done on the soccer player that we've been talking about in this case, Rory Street, and the toxicology report shows cocaine was in Rory's blood system.
Can you tell us, by reading off of the report, exactly how much cocaine was in her system?
Yes, the test revealed that 60 nanograms per milliliter of cocaine were in Rory's system at the time of the test.
And in terms of amount, how would you classify that?
Well, the amount in and of itself is, I think it's nominal, but it's still significant.
Why do you say that it's significant?
Well, even this amount of cocaine can have some of the effects that we've discussed earlier, and particularly so when someone is exercising in the heat.
Now, you just mentioned exercising in the heat. Based on all the evidence that you reviewed, do you believe that the symptoms Rory Street were exhibiting were a combination of heat, exercise, and cocaine use?
Yes, absolutely. The symptoms that Rory Street demonstrated, according to the deposition testimony that I've reviewed from folks who saw Rory during that soccer practice, those symptoms and signs were absolutely consistent with the effects of cocaine use.
And Mr. London, is it possible that the signs of a heat stroke are also consistent with the signs of cocaine use?
Certainly.
Objection, Your Honor. Improper opinion.
Any response?
I'm sorry, Your Honor?
Any response?
Yes, Your Honor. Specifically, Mr. London indicated exactly what the relationship was between cocaine use and heat stroke, specifically as he discussed the constricting of the blood vessels. So he's merely indicating the symptoms of heat stroke may have some sort of an overlap with cocaine use.
And Ms. Coley, anything further?
Yes, Your Honor. This witness was tendered as an expert in toxicology, not in cardiology, not in medicine. He doesn't even have a medical degree. To have him to testify about heat stroke would be improper.
And I'm going to sustain that objection, Ms. Leidy. I did not allow Ms. Coley's expert to testify beyond her designation, and nor will I allow yours. You may proceed.
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. London, is it possible that the amount of cocaine found in Rory's system doesn't accurately reflect exactly how much cocaine she had on that soccer field?
Well, it's not just possible. I think it's likely under the circumstances.
Why is that?
Well, a number of factors. Number one, one would assume that Rory used the cocaine before practice, not during practice. And we've heard a lot of testimony, and I've reviewed deposition testimony that Rory was obviously physically exerting herself, sweating profusely. And so that would cause the body to process cocaine that may have been ingested earlier in the day, such that when Rory was ultimately tested, the amount in the bloodstream was lower. And then I'd also note that Rory had this incident, passed away, and wasn't tested until over a full day later. And so the sample of the blood was taken over a full day after the death. And so that would also contribute to dissipation of the amount.
Mr. London, just to close this out, what is your opinion as it relates to Rory's cocaine use in this case?
Based on my training, education, and experience and all the materials that I've reviewed, I think to a reasonable degree of probability in my field that Rory Street died in whole or at least in part due to ingesting cocaine.
Are you sure you mean in whole?
Well, at least in part. The cardiology aspect is not what I'm here to testify about, but certainly at least in part, cocaine use contributed to or caused this person's death.
Thank you, Mr. London. Pass the witness.
Ms. Coley,
Yes, Your Honor.
you may proceed.
Good afternoon, Mr. London. Are you able to see and hear me okay?
Yes, I am.
How are you doing today?
I'm doing well enough.
I want to start by talking about your qualifications.
Okay.
You're not a medical doctor.
No.
You're not a coroner.
No, I'm not.
You didn't go to medical school.
Yeah, thus my not being a doctor, right?
You have a degree in toxicology.
Correct.
And that's a bachelor's degree.
Yeah, it's a bachelor's degree.
You've never treated a patient.
No, I wouldn't dare to.
But you do have clients.
Yes, of course.
And those clients are mostly lawyers.
Some are lawyers. I mean, I offer a broad range of consulting services, including consulting and testifying in legal matters.
So for the past 15 years, you've been doing that consulting in legal matters.
Yes.
You've been consulting in lawsuits.
Yes, I consult in lawsuits.
Now, on direct examination, you testified that Rory Street died at least in part from cocaine.
That's right. That is my opinion.
But when you reached that conclusion, you were being paid by the defendant's lawyers.
Well, I am paid for my time and my expertise, the time that I devote to reviewing materials, but I'm not paid for any particular opinion.
Sir, I was asking you who you were being paid by. When you were forming your opinion, you were being paid by the defense.
Yes, I'm compensated by the defense counsel.
So let's talk about the thoroughness of your analysis. As a consultant, you'd agree it's important to be thorough.
Sure.
Important to consider all relevant evidence.
Yes.
But in forming your conclusions about how Rory died, you didn't consider the outside temperature.
Well, a moment ago, I wasn't allowed to talk about the outside temperature, so I'm not sure if I'm supposed to talk about this, but yes, I did consider the outside temperature.
Well, sir, you're aware that there was a temperature report in this case.
Yes, I reviewed that.
You know that because our expert reviewed it.
That's right, and I in turn reviewed it as well as his report.
Sir, is it your testimony today that you reviewed the temperature report from September 7th?
Yes, I was provided that as part of the materials for this case, yes.
You remember giving an expert report in this case?
Yes.
You knew that you were required to disclose every piece of evidence that you reviewed, right?
Yes, I certainly intended to.
And I want you to pull up Exhibit 18 on your screen.
Can't seem to find the mouse.
Let me know when you have it in front of you. And Mr. Matz, can we actually pull up Exhibit 18 on the screen as well, specifically the section about what information Mr. London reviewed? Mr. London, do you see it on the screen there in front of you?
I do.
Sir, this is the complete portion of your expert report where you just said you were required to disclose every document you reviewed.
Yes.
Sir, you didn't disclose that you reviewed the temperature report from that day, right?
No, that document's not specifically listed here.
Pass the witness, Your Honor.
Your Honor, I have no redirect. May this witness be excused?
You may.
And with that, Your Honor, the defense rests our case in chief.
Counsel, before we proceed, let's confirm time. Then we'll discuss what exhibits have been admitted, and we'll proceed to closing arguments unless either of you are requesting 1 or 2 minutes to compose yourself. I have at this time, Ms. Leidy, you have 11 minutes remaining.
Thank you, Your Honor.
And Ms. Coley, I have that you have 17 minutes remaining.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Do either of you have any objections to the court's calculation of time?
No, Your Honor.
At this juncture, based upon the court's record keeping, I show the following exhibits have been admitted. Exhibit number 2, the aerial photograph of the practice fields marked. Exhibit 3, Rory Street photograph. Exhibit 9, photograph of the practice field. Exhibit 11, Texas High School Soccer Coaches Association PowerPoint presentation. And Exhibit 15, the toxicology report. Ms. Coley, are you aware or do you believe that any further exhibits have been admitted through the testimony of the witnesses here today?
Your Honor, I don't know if I missed it, but did you mention Exhibit 14?
I did not mention Exhibit 14. I don't recall it being used with any witnesses today. I know the parties stipulated during pretrial that they all agreed that it could be admitted, but did either of you use it with a witness?
Your Honor, our agreement was that we wanted to admit it pre-trial, pre-admit the document. I'm sorry if that was unclear.
That was my understanding as well, Your Honor.
And we did have that discussion. I guess my question is a little different. Did either of you use it with a witness today?
No, Your Honor.
No, Your Honor.
Other than our discussion regarding Exhibit 14, are there any other exhibits that you believe have been admitted and that would be appropriate to go back to the jury?
No, Your Honor.
Your Honor, we'd just like to clarify that the exhibits that Your Honor, also pre-admitted in your pretrial order, we would be allowed to talk about those in closing argument.
Have y'all been given any specific instructions regarding that in connection with the competition? Ordinarily in a trial, if an exhibit was not used with a witness, it would not go back to the jury.
Your Honor, my understanding of the rules of this competition is that if an exhibit has been pre-admitted, then we aren't required to authenticate it and enter it or even use it with a witness. However, Miss Lady, if you disagree with that, I'm not sure.
That was my understanding as well.
Anything to go through the competition rules will certainly follow the competition rules. So any exhibits then that have been pre-admitted will be permitted for use during closing arguments. Ms. Coley, Ms. Leidy, anything further that we should discuss prior to advancing to closing arguments?
No, Your Honor, other than the request for a brief 2-minute recess.
Will 2 minutes be sufficient?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor. That would be great.
Then I'll allow each of you 2 minutes to prepare.
Thank you.
Again, and I'll confirm, Ms. Coley, are you reserving any time for rebuttal?
Your Honor, may I reserve whatever time I don't use for rebuttal as opposed to a specific amount?
Your remaining time, you may.
Thank you, Your Honor.
All right. With that, then you may proceed.
The defendant you met today was sympathetic, thoughtful, and compassionate. But the defendant who took the stand today was not the defendant who took the practice field on September 7th, 2018. Today, the defendant said, "I love my players like they're my own kids." But that day, take your sorry butt to Burma Road. You are useless. Today, she said, safety first. Safety is my top priority. But that hot September day, you're going to run until you pass out. Today, on trial, I want my students to reach their full potential. But in practice, she grabbed a student by her shirt, yanked her to her feet, just so she could be knocked down again. The defendant didn't stop when Rory Street was struggling to move. Didn't stop when Rory Street was struggling to breathe, didn't stop when Rory Street was struggling to stand. She didn't stop until Rory Street was dead. As the plaintiff, we have the burden. We had to prove it's more likely than not that the defendant's negligence caused Rory to die. We met that burden with 3 simple facts. Number 1, the defendant used extreme disciplinary methods that put every child at risk. Most of us don't want to be outside when it's 104 degrees. She had students sprinting in that heat. The Coaches Association told the defendant, when the temperatures reach 100 degrees, you must have breaks every 15 minutes. Not could, not should, must. Yet not a single witness could testify today that there was a single water break. But the defendant didn't just use those conditions for practice. She used them for punishment. Burma Road. Sprint 90 feet. Sprint another 90 while dribbling. Take a shot on an open goal. Now, if you miss, your penalty is starting over. But if you score, your reward is crawling 180 feet on all fours. No shade, no water, no breaks. Congratulations. Now, the defendant tried to tell you that this was about helping teenagers reach their potential. She tried to tell you that this Burma Road drill wasn't meant to teach her kids a lesson. But we know that's not true. The first time the defendant ever said that this wasn't meant to teach the kids a lesson was today in court. This was about the defendant putting competition above caution, about putting herself above her students. She'd won the district. She won the region. But in 26 years, she had never won the state championship. And you know what they say? There's no points for second place. The defendant wanted to win so badly that she put her player's safety at risk. And that brings me to fact number 2. While the defendant put every student at risk, she put Rory Street in danger. Today, the defense spent a lot of time talking about Burma Road. You heard it was a tradition. Coach Taylor said it had been done for decades and no one has ever been hurt. Okay. But what about the tackling line? That tradition started on September 7th, 2018. Today, the defendant told you that in her 26 years of coaching, she has never used that drill on any student. Not her worst players, not her best, not her own child, not anyone, except Rory Street. The defense tried to say slide tackles, well, they're a part of the game. But this wasn't slide tackle practice. It was violence. Organized, deliberate violence. 15 against 1 violence. This coach, the person who's supposed to be in charge of these children, told the team to take turns knocking Rory to the ground. 1, do it again. 2, again. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, until 15 times. The defendant didn't stop until Rory Street was dead. And that brings me to point number 3. The defendant ignored the warning signs. If she had done this to a player who looked healthy, it would have been horrendous. But to do this to someone who was clearly struggling is downright unspeakable. Pale, lifeless, hands on her hips, breathing heavily. That's how Aubrey Saracen described Rory before the defendant had 15 athletes treat her like a punching bag. Now, the defendant tried to say, well, it wasn't my fault. I didn't know that Rory had cocaine in her system. But that doesn't matter. Because today we learned that the symptoms of heat stroke caused by cocaine are identical to the symptoms of any other heat stroke. So no matter what caused those symptoms, the fact is they were staring the defendant right in the face. No matter what caused those symptoms, they should have caused the defendant to stop practice. But the defendant didn't stop until Rory was dead. So let's go to the verdict form. Today we had to prove negligence, a lack of ordinary care. Ordinary care would have been following the rules created by the High School Coaches Association. Ordinary care would be no Burma Road when it's 104 degrees. Ordinary care would be protecting the student who is struggling, not pummeling her. The defendant was negligent. So the only other element we had to prove was causation. And we didn't have to prove that the defendant's negligence was the only cause of Rory's death, just that it was a cause, that it contributed to Rory's death. The autopsy report says that Rory died from cardiac arrest. Dr. McConaughey testified that Rory's cardiac arrest was caused by heat stroke. When a person's body overheats so much that their heart just gives out. So what could have caused Rory's body to overheat? It wasn't a weak heart. This was a star 18-year-old athlete in peak physical condition. It wasn't the cocaine. She had billionths of a gram in her blood. Their own expert today called it nominal. This is common sense. Running, sprinting, crawling, falling, standing again and again, nonstop for more than an hour in 103-degree heat contributed to Rory's death. The plaintiff has met its burden. Now, the defense today has said that Rory caused her own death by using cocaine. And here, the defense has the burden of proof. They had to prove that their expert was right and ours wasn't. So let's put these experts side by side. Our expert has a medical degree from Baylor. Theirs has a bachelor's degree in toxicology. Our expert is the chief of cardiology at McClellan Memorial. Their expert didn't think to consider how hot it was when Rory died. Our expert helps patients, their expert helps lawyers. And today, their expert claimed under oath today on the stand that he had reviewed the temperature report. But on cross, he had to admit that wasn't true. Their expert is the one who lied. The defense's case requires a comparison of the experts, but there's no comparison. They have failed to meet their burden. Rory Street was just 18 years old. She had her whole life in front of her. And what makes her death even more painful is how easily it could have been prevented. All the defendant had to do was stop the abuse. But the defendant didn't stop when she saw Rory was struggling. The defendant didn't stop to let Rory get a water break in 104-degree heat. Didn't stop when Rory could no longer stand on her own. Didn't stop when Rory had been knocked down once, twice, 15 times. She didn't stop until Rory's heart stopped. We ask you to find the defendant liable because she didn't stop until Rory Street was dead. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Coley. Ms. Leidy,
Yes, Your Honor.
you may proceed.
May it please the court. It wasn't the coach, it was the cocaine. See, when Coach Taylor saw that one of her own was struggling and goofing off during practice, she implemented disciplinary measures to get Rory Street's head back in the game. But on this day, September 7th, 2018, somehow, those drills couldn't shake Rory's lack of focus. They were rigorous, physically taxing, sure. But they were drills she and her teammates had done time and time before. She had never had a problem with the Burma Road drill before. But you see, when Coach Taylor saw that this time Rory was having a problem, Rory was goofing off, well, Coach Taylor got frustrated. So she decided to implement a new kind of discipline. A slide tackle drill. A row of slide tackles. You see, slide tackles were something that were common in soccer. They were something that happened multiple times in one game. And in fact, they were something that not only had Rory practiced, but he had perfected. So it was completely unforeseeable. Rory would collapse during a play she had done over and over again. Not a single person on that field knew at the moment Rory put on her cleats and stepped onto the field, she had cocaine running through her veins because she kept that information to herself. She didn't tell her teammates. She didn't tell the trainer. And she didn't tell Coach Taylor. You see, the sad truth is, no amount of discipline, intervention, or safety measures could have prevented this tragedy. Because when it came to Rory Street's death, this was never about the coach. It was about the cocaine. No one deserves to be harmed while doing nothing more than playing the sport that they love. And we extend our deepest sympathies and our condolence to the Street family for their loss of their daughter. But it's important that we separate out the pain and the sympathy that we all feel, and we focus on the facts. Because the facts in this case point to only one logical conclusion. Coach Taylor is not liable. You see, when it comes to assigning fault, Your Honor, you're going to be guided by a document that I'm sure you're very familiar with, and that's the verdict form. And in this case, this form is going to ask you to answer two questions. One, was Reese Taylor negligent? And two, was his conduct the proximate cause of Rory's death? So if you don't mind, I'd like to walk through those questions one at a time, starting with negligence. You see, negligence means the failure to use care. And for someone in Coach Taylor's position, it means failing to act as a reasonable and a responsible coach would have. So if you find that on September 7, 2018, Coach Taylor didn't put Rory in any more risk than she put herself, then you cannot find her liable. So let's set the stage for this fateful day. It's hot. It's Waco hot. And it gets hot here up to 105 degrees. And it's been hot here. For the last 26 years that Coach Taylor has coached soccer on that very field. On September 7th, 2018, Coach Taylor was hosting a practice, a scrimmage that required every single person's attention on that field, especially Rory's. What you heard from Aubrey Saracen is this was nothing new. In fact, Coach Taylor had performed practices, drills, and scrimmages in this kind of heat before. We never heard anything about anyone ever having any problems or ever collapsing in that kind of a temperature. What you did hear about, though, were Coach Taylor's expectations. What she told you was that, well, I have an expectation that my students will listen. I have an expectation that my students will be safe. I have an expectation that my students will be focused, but above all else, I have an expectation that they show up to practice clean and sober. You see, unbeknownst to Coach Taylor, Rory Street had stepped onto that field with cocaine in her system. And if she truly was having a problem, well, she sure didn't show any signs of it. Now, opposing counsel harped on the fact that nobody approached Rory to ask her if she needed any help. No one approached Rory asking if she needed a break or a water break or if she was okay. But as Coach Taylor told you, as trainer Jess Merriweather told you, the students knew that they could do that. The students knew that if they needed water, they had every opportunity to go get some. The students knew that if they needed to take a break because they couldn't handle the stress, they had every opportunity to do that as well. And what you heard here today is at no point during the practice on the soccer field, while she was running Burma Road, or even during the slide tackle drill, did Rory ever express any pain, wanting to go get some water, or wanting to stop. You see, the only person that they brought before you to tell you that Rory was showing any symptoms was her friend, Aubrey. And you see, Ms. Saracen painted a picture of a student who was in rapid decline. She told you that at one point, Rory was pale, Rory was lifeless. I believe her words were something like the color was draining on her face. She was clutching her chest as she was complaining about feeling funny. In fact, what she said was, this was out of character. Apparently, it was so out of character that she was so concerned for her friend's well-being and yet said nothing. Rory said nothing. You see, when trainer Jess Merriweather and Coach Taylor watched Rory on the field that day, there didn't seem to be anything wrong. Well, besides the fact that she was goofing off. The problem that day was never about heat exhaustion. It was one of discipline. And what you heard from both the trainer and the coach was that Rory had a problem with disciplinary methods. Rory was the type of person who had all the potential in the world and yet goofed off at practice regularly. And so on September 7, 2017, when they're practicing a full-blown scrimmage that requires everyone's attention, Coach Taylor told them that if the star player's goofing off, it affects the rest of the team. And so she sent her over to Burma Road. Now, I want you to be clear about how opposing counsel described this drill. She said this was an extreme disciplinary measure. Extreme. I mean, if it was so extreme, why did they allow Coach Taylor to perform this drill when he was back at Waco High 30 years ago? If this drill was so extreme, why did they allow Jordan Street to perform this drill 30 years ago? And she showed you slides of the Texas Soccer Coaches Association guidelines. So you got to ask yourself, if this drill was so extreme, why in the 30 years that it's been used, has it never been banned? It's because it's not. It's a tried and true tradition at Waco High School, one that's been there long before Coach was there. And you see, no matter how they tried to exaggerate how dangerous this was by converting it into feet instead of yards, the fact still remains, Rory's done this before. And Rory looked just fine. But what Rory was also doing was goofing off yet again. And so you heard how Coach Taylor sent her from Burma Road to the slide tackle drill. And yes, we agree. She had never done this drill before. But she told you, this was never about punishment. It was about focus. It was about being alert, about being attentive, about making sure that you're agile. And if she thought that Rory couldn't handle it, if Rory had expressed any distress or pain, she would have never let it happen. Nobody else at that practice had any issues, and Rory had never voiced any issues because there wasn't a problem. The problem here was the cocaine. And that brings me to proximate cause. You see, in this case, there's no dispute that the cause of death was a cardiac attack. So the question here is what caused that cardiac attack? And when you look at the autopsy report on the second page, what it specifically says is undeterminable. And that's why opposing counsel and I both brought experts before you. One to tell you it was heat stroke, ours to tell you that it was at least in part caused by cocaine. So I want to talk about Mr. London. Opposing counsel said that a comparison of experts in this case is important. Well, then fine, let's compare. So she talked about credentials a lot, but she never talked about the science.
Ms. Leidy, I'll give you a little leeway, but that is the expiration of your time. I'll give you an extra 30 seconds to conclude.
Yes, Your Honor. And in fact, what this expert told you is that this was always the cocaine, because the symptoms that Rory was experiencing was hyperthermia. And that cocaine was in part the cause of death. This was never about the coach. This was always about the cocaine. Find her not liable. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Ms. Coley, you have 4 minutes remaining.
Yes, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
The defense has brought up cocaine a number of times in today's case. But you don't have to trust my opinion on the significance of the cocaine. Trust the experts. Both experts agree that the amount of cocaine was nominal. Their own expert even admitted that if it contributed, it wasn't the only cause of Rory's death. And whether the cocaine contributed or not, Rory showed the symptoms of heat stroke. And Coach Taylor saw those symptoms. And she had Rory tackled 15 times anyway. Now, the defense wants you to believe that the cocaine caused Rory's death. But there was only one witness who took the stand today and told you that they think that's true. Their expert. The same expert who has no medical degree. The same expert being paid by the defense attorneys. The same expert who lied on the stand today. It wasn't the cocaine. It was the defendant's refusal to stop. The defendant wouldn't stop until Rory Street was dead. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, counsel. All right. That will conclude our trial of this matter.